In the middle of the night or early Friday morning, depending upon where you are in the world, a group of experienced comics professionals get together to examine and instruct about the art form that they love. That's great comic artwork on Comics by Night, Fridays at 5 a.m. Eastern, here on the Indie Comics Network, indiecomicsnetwork.com.
What was that? This is not a charade.
What a crowd indeed.
Oh, yeah.
Welcome, everyone. This morning, we have a very special guest with us today, Mr. Eric July. Thank you so much for getting up early on a Thursday morning and coming and hanging out with us.
Oh, man, I appreciate y'all having me, man. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be a good time today. We've got a lot of questions for you. I'm sure the chat does too. Folks, I know there's going to be a lot of questions coming in today. We're probably not going to be able to read everybody's comments today, so we're going to focus on Super Chats first, like we normally do, and we will try to get to everybody that we can. But since it's my show, my questions come first, so that's how that's going to work out today. So, Eric, how's your week been?
It's been good, man. It's been we've been really busy preparing for this next book. We got MegaCon next week. Obviously, we just ended the Alpha Core campaign, so it's been a great week. Really productive one, man. So I never can complain. Such is life.
Right. Yeah, we got Chuck on next week.
Oh, beautiful.
So looking forward to talking to him. I've been wanting to interview him for a while.
Awesome.
We've had Mike on a few times. Mike is always fun to talk to. Man, what a wealth of knowledge that guy has, right?
Oh, man. I'm blessed to have him working on stuff here, man. I pick up and soak up so much knowledge from Mike, man. He is awesome.
Yeah, he's always been one of the most approachable pros that I've ever met. So willing just to give out information to educate.
Absolutely.
He's some are the sage from the stage kind of people, and others are the guide from the side, and he's a little mix of both.
Yeah,
I think he definitely is.
I see that.
Randy, how's this week been for you, man?
It's been an adventure. Yeah,
Yeah.
a little bit more crazier than usual, but it's all right. Doing a lot of commercial work, still trying to get that
Very
short
good.
story finished up and waiting,
Yeah.
looking forward to lettering the Shadow Kingdom. That's next. on the
Yes, the great Russ Leach doing pencils and inks on
Great.
that. We've got
list. Yeah.
Glenn Fleming offering. You do the colors for the cover, right? Right, Glenn?
I did the colours for a cover. I'm not sure whether
a
it's been
cover,
used
okay.
yet, but yeah, I did. Yeah,
Yeah,
and I
very good.
I worked on the logo as well. And,
Yeah.
It's been
stuff.
good. It's been good. It's going to be a great book. It's going to be
It is.
fantastic book.
Yeah, Pedro, how are things down there in Panama? Have you got a new mic yet?
Not yet. Next week. So you guys got to put up with trucks from the
I know
mine.
they
coming
they gotta ship it to you on like the donkey, right?
The
down.
drone.
A burro. That's called a
By a
burro, sir. Yeah.
Drop it off. Is that what it is?
Yeah. So this
Yeah.
week, I don't know. I've been getting up with animation assignments. So that's been fun. And I actually dug a well 2 days ago for the community.
Oh, that was
was
nice.
cool.
fun.
Hey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a
Giving
really
back,
good,
right?
like since we're starting like the dry season down here, like the community gets together and we dug up a well that can fit like around 9 bodies. So it was a lot of work.
You can fit 9 bodies.
Yeah, like I just made the observation, like I know this is for water, guys, but if you need to put bodies somewhere,
If there is a
this
problem,
place- yeah, exactly. So
if you ever do have an issue to deal with,
yeah.
you Panamanians are hilarious.
Mhm.
Whiskey, how about you? Staying busy this week?
Yeah, it's been a roller coaster. Like if I could, I demonetize your channel forever if I talked about it.
Yeah, let's not do that. I
There you
appreciate
go.
That's not.
All right, let's go and welcome the chat this morning. We got Levi Skeen scooting on in right here at the first. Hail to the chat. Thought I'd show up early to get a good parking spot. Yeah, you're going to want one. There's Whiskey O'Connell. He's in the chat and in the panel. Frederick Wilmot in the house. Let the bacon sizzle. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. There's Russ Leach, the comic book black belt himself. Good day, all. Good to see you here. Dreaded Dinosaur. Eric Hodson in the house. Hail, everyone.
Hey.
What's the good word? The good word is comics are awesome, my friend.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all know that, right? Every once in a while, we have a special guest stop by and just let us know exactly how he feels about it.
Comics are awesome.
Yes, they are,
Very
Keanu.
good.
And so are you, my friend. We've got, let me see, who else do we have in shout today? We've got Hojo is here. Welcome, Hojo. It's good to have you here. Dave Brink is here. Welcome. Greetings, all. You sexy
Dave.
people. Look at that. How do you know? How does he know? Joe King Lee is in the house. Welcome. Good to see you here. Big Boned. That's funny. Big Boned.
Yeah.
I like that name. Welcome. It's good to see you here today. We've got Headless
Bourgeoisie.
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 French. The
Every
French.
time.
There's no way I can pull the
Hail.
Hoosier. No way I can pull the Hoosier out of my mouth. Enough to say that. Sorry, guys. Agent Zero is here today. Welcome, Agent Zero. Good to have you here. Caffeinated Wolf. I thought it was
Okay,
the last
the
person
Baltic
on earth to
Sea.
remember that movie. Very good.
Yeah.
Oh,
Hex
no.
Ellen is here.
What's up, Hex?
Welcome.
Love that.
Pelzor is in the house. Welcome, Pelzor. Thanks for
Hail.
being here today. We do appreciate you. B.A. Turner has joined us as well. Welcome, B.A. Turner. Iconolists, I think I'm saying that right. Welcome. It's good to have you here. We've got Pop XP Network in the
Hey,
house.
what's up,
Welcome.
guys?
And what's up,
Not
Eric
bad.
July?
Yeah.
Yeah. We got Benjamin Soto. Did I say him already? Welcome, Benjamin. It's
Yeah.
good to have you here. Guys, I'll try to welcome you as you show up. Feel free to come in, make yourself comfortable. Eric, I'm sure you probably aren't too familiar with what we do over here, but we are a really laid back kind of morning show. We're what people drive to work to on Thursday morning and listen to while they're getting their stuff done. They pop us on, and some people like to put off work to get into the chat and start commenting. So we like to give them a reason to procrastinate. So
Some people have been putting work off for 50 years.
for 50 years. Yeah, we've been doing that
And
for a
those are
while.
called geniuses.
Yeah, we've had Bold Cat Studios just pop in. Thank you, Johnny. Welcome, Johnny. It's good to have you here in 32 flavors. That's great to see everyone here today. Wow, you know what? Let's warm up with an article, shall we? Let's have a little fun with that, and then we'll start bugging Eric with all of the many questions we have. Here we go. Pay a lot of money for that. Got to use it. Did you guys hear about this? Penguin Random House gets Wattpad webtoons.
Is
They're
that
gonna be
English?
distributing this?
That's
It must
exactly
be.
what I was asking, Pedro.
Yeah.
It must be. And I really want to get Eric's thoughts on this one. So let's
Mm-hmm.
take a look at this article real quick. So Penguin Random House Publisher Service has reached an agreement to distribute the publishing output of Wattpad Webtoon to all sales channels worldwide, the company's announced. The new agreement includes not only the graphic novels of Webtoon Unscrolled, but also the fiction of Wattpad books. What do you think of that? I think mainstream comics are so bad.
I don't know, man. What are these guys? I don't know. I don't know what the move is here. If like, it's hard to gauge like what this actually means in the grand scheme of things and what that appeal is going to be as far as like webtoons and is there appeal like outside of that? I guess we're about to find out, right? With Penguin Random House distributing them like I guess they do the rest of the material it is that they distribute. So yeah, that's always interesting. I mean, physical media is where the money's at. That's just kind of, look, if I've learned anything else doing this, that's just kind of what it is. I've had some great conversations privately with guys that do the webtoon thing, and they get these millions of views on this book, and then ultimately it doesn't amount to really anything for them, right?
Right.
And so that's the thing that they're trying to figure out. A lot of those guys are trying to figure out is how to monetize that. So, I'm guessing this is one of those efforts.
I think so. It says here that the reference to all sales channels surely includes the comic direct market.
I don't know. Like, I think this webtoon thing, it's gonna be more so than it's gonna be a manhwa invasion, more so than anything. This is gonna be all about that Korean comic.
It might be.
Yeah, because it sounds like the webtoon consumer is used to reading stuff for free. So if they can capture 10% of that readership, they're gonna be in for the money. But I don't think the Western artists and webtoons are gonna make all the money. I think it's more about the manhwa here. So
right.
I mean,
So
good for them. Someone's making money.
Yeah, I think we're seeing, especially with Eric's success, that we're seeing that people are not leaving. It's not that they don't want comics. They want comics. They do. They want something, right? And so I think that I think maybe Penguin is seeing that they have an opportunity to grab some additional customers and to sell more books. Because really, to them, it doesn't matter whether it's Batman or some webtoon, as long as they're selling books, right?
Yeah, as long as they move units.
I kind of agree with Eric here. It's like physical media is definitely the way to go. Nintendo built their empire on physical media. Even though they're selling digital products, they do so in the form of physical cartridges and games and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And what a way to repurpose stuff that was already put out digitally.
All you got to do is look at the example of Lore Olympus.
Yeah.
They're selling a large amount of product.
I'm surprised it's taken them so long.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Now, you mentioned that, maybe 10%, Pedro, 10% of our audience might come around and buy
physical books. Yeah.
So I started following you, Eric, 2017, 2018. What first turned me on to your content was the libertarian kind of political stuff.
Go Mises.
Yeah. So you started out, and I guess before that you were doing music, right?
Yeah. That was music was what launched my channel for sure back in the 2000s. It was music. It was various kinds of music for sure. Because I was all over the place with genres, but yeah, it started with music. We started to mix in some like social commentary, political commentary as well. And then it kind of morphed into where it's like, whatever I feel like putting out, I just kind of put out. So about any given subject. So yeah,
Right. So building this platform over what 20 years now?
Almost, yeah.
Yeah, almost 20 years. What's been some of the biggest changes that you've seen in kind of that the ability to go viral, I guess?
Well, I mean, for sure, like a YouTube was way different back then when I first started. It wasn't like what it is now. The type of content that got around, worrying about algorithms, and that was not even like on our mind. It was more so as a hub for me to put things out, right? So whether it be with my music and my songs or whatever it was, and as a lot of people started to gravitate towards YouTube, especially like with doing like commentary stuff, it allowed people this sort of a medium to drive traffic to other avenues, right?
Mm.
And that's exactly what it did for me, where it became basically everything myself. So whether it be with obviously what we're doing with the comic book stuff, but also with my bands that I was in, that was a big part of our growth. And I just happened to be in front of a lot of it, and it benefited me. And sometimes it wasn't even on purpose. It was just, for example, with music videos in my old band, it was funny watching the entire industry kind of gravitate towards that over the needless touring that
Right.
definitely metalcore was just known for doing. I was like, well, wait a minute, we got this avenue about that we can get eyes on, and we don't have to necessarily get on the road to do it. So that was what I was doing, and we really, really focused on was putting out like music videos, like a lot of them before, like a lot of these independent metalcore guys were really, really doing that. So again, it wasn't because I was trying to do it. It was more of I just found that to be an outlet. And now you see, it's funny how the whole scene is like digitized right now, where people are really, really focusing on digital media, and even that's constantly changing with the short format stuff. Everything's constantly like changing. So that would be to me something to point to with like YouTube and social media. It's just completely changed the game, and really everybody's still trying to figure this thing out.
Yeah, it's really nebulous, I think, and it changes, about every 6 months. So around that time, when you were starting your channel, I was actually working for a label that did metalcore stuff, and yeah, the touring it just wasn't feasible financially anymore. That we had to have guys crashing on couches and stuff. We couldn't afford a good bus for them.
Yep.
It was just a real nightmare. And then this digital music and people being able to record their own stuff at home and do
That's
really,
a big part
really,
of it too. The technology changed, and it became far more accessible. I'm glad you brought that up, especially with music. That also changed everything. Where you had, bands, instead of having to, spend so much money, or the label spending so much money on them if they were signed to go to some big name producer. I remember, you speak of metalcore scene, like I don't know what volumes the band is doing right now, but I remember it was such a big deal for them at the time, where they were while they were signed and doing this. That's probably another issue. I don't know why they were doing it, but they did everything themselves. They were recording, mixing, and mastering it all within the band, right? And that just wasn't that's not many people, for one, even had the capacity to do that. But the technology just became far more accessible, and it just changed everything. And that's why I think you're seeing kind of this rise of independence, or people being able to keep things more independent than what they could in the past.
Thank you for the super chat. We do appreciate that very much. Thank you, 32 Flavors. There's something that we do here whenever anyone sends a super chat or backs a project that we're talking about. We say they're flipping us the bird. Okay, so we make the bird dance. Here you go. Sadly, that bird has better dance moves than I've ever had in my life. 32 Flavors.
I can take that bird.
The label I was working with was a group called Ocean View Records. Yeah, we were called Ocean View Records back then. So
I got a question for Eric there. Eric, do you play like any instruments yourself?
Oh yeah, I can play a little bit of the guitar. But I mean my instrument, I monitored music. And it was piano. So
Sweet.
Oh, nice.
but yeah. In the band though, no. I mean the guitarists in our bands are way way better than what I'd ever be. So yeah, it's all those guys for sure.
Yeah, I played for a while. I wound up getting sick in 2021. I got the Rainey and I both got the Delta variant of COVID.
The
We
C.
went in the hospital. Both. We had 5 months in the hospital.
Yeah.
Both almost died. It's funny how similar our stories are.
Him in
but
Florida,
actually-
me in Michigan. Yeah.
Yeah, but I actually lost use of my left arm, and I was a pretty talented guitarist, and I was a singer. And as you notice, I have to. Sometimes I'll run out of breath towards the end of a sentence. I have severe lung damage from COVID, so they said I wouldn't live, but I did. They said I wouldn't breathe again on my own. I'm here. Said I wouldn't walk again. I'm doing that. So I mean, we've done a lot that they said they wouldn't do, that I wouldn't be able to do again. So we don't let it stop. I am playing music again, so that's nice.
There you go.
One of the things that I did notice about what's happening with the music industry, how it became more accessible for the individuals to kind of produce quality work themselves. We're seeing that transition happen with comics too.
Absolutely.
And so I've kind of, Randy and I, we kind of lived through that process. So is Glenn. One of the things that I did want to bring up though is, so for 20 years, you're building a platform. And how many subs do you have? Like 500 and
On YouTube, 500,000 somewhere around.
500,000 subs,
Yeah.
right? When it come out that you were going to be launching a book, I have some marketing stuff, and I said, look, here's what's going to happen. At least 10% of his audience is going to come out and support that book. I said, so if you don't make $1 million, he's done something wrong. Right?
Yeah.
And more than 10% of your audience came out, which is great. And I think a lot of people don't understand that in trying to sell anything, you've got to build an audience, because whatever you get, those views on your webtoon, those don't necessarily equate to sales and likes and retweets and all that. Those don't necessarily equate to sales. It's about 10% of whatever audience you are drawing in. That's really what you're going to get. So what do you think was the biggest contributing factor to building that kind of an audience?
Well, I think for me, and I can only speak to my experience, is that for everything that I did, and I know that there's a lot of people that kind of found out about me, let's say far more recently than I had been around. Like I had been around doing something in the independent space for a very, very long time. So I call it rapport with the audience. And these guys that have been around for as long as they had watched me, grow, and they watched me put out some product, whatever it was, namely music, right? And they saw me deliver on everything it was that I said I was going to do, and I took it very, very seriously. Like I wasn't like, if I said I was going to do something, I was going to do it. But it was also one of those things where, like, the investment into the music video stuff, right? I spent a lot of money to do that. Like when Backwards, my second band, first launched. So it was one of those things where I took it seriously enough to where I built this rapport with the audience, so they were willing to rock with me no matter what it was that I had did. But to your point, and I think this is where, I don't want people to get it twisted, because they may get their expectations up to a degree that they'll never reach. You brought it up. I brought it up a million times, that viewership, subscribers, that is not always equal buyers. Especially depending on what type of audience that you cultivated during that period of time. Just because you put out a product does not mean that everybody's going to gravitate towards that. If it was that easy, everybody would do it. It's just not how it works. So it is a certain type of audience that you for sure are going to want to cultivate, want to build up, if you're trying to sell them a product, no matter what it is that it is. So I was always kind of floating around art and entertainment, right? So I think if I did something else, like, I don't know, started to sell vitamins, that wouldn't do as well as something in the arts and something in entertainment. So that's more or less where I floated around with what it was that I was doing. And then, here you go. So it was a grind for sure. And it still is. It still is, because just because they buy one product doesn't mean they're going to buy the next one, right? So it's always the hustle that's going to be involved with it, and having an audience certainly helps, but it's also understanding who your audience is, and how you're marketing your product to them is really, really big.
Yeah. So kind of a follow-up question, I guess. I came to your platform really during kind of the height of the kind of Trump derangement. I was honestly, I was a registered Democrat that went independent and became a libertarian. So I'm having all these libertarian views, and you're just spouting them out left and right. And then you're talking about comics, and you're talking about music, talking about pop culture, and it just really resonated with me, right? So, but one of the things that really stood out, especially about that period of time, was the critique. Like, you had a lot of critique about a lot of things. So recently, we've seen a lot of people come at you with a lot of critique. Do you think building a platform on that kind of critique maybe has caused people to be a little extra
and go to extra mile to critique me? Yeah, I don't know if that's how I'd word it, but yeah, I mean, I could see that, for sure. I mean, look, I was a very, like, that period of time, especially, like, I would argue, like 2019 maybe to 2021, I was probably the least productive that I had ever been from the creative perspective in my life, because I was doing a lot of, I did the reviews and stuff. I guess all that stuff that I was doing during that period of time, and I wasn't creating, like with anything, like with music. I wasn't doing anything really with that. It was, hey, do For Cannon's Sake every day, my show, and just talk about whatever's happening. Do a review here and there on a comic book. That was more or less what it was that I was doing. So once I made the decision that I was going to start the Rippaverse, right, it just changed. I didn't have as much of it around, and it was kind of difficult to navigate, and actually strange in some ways. But yeah, it's a new thing, especially for a lot of the audience, a part of the audience, like people that know me for music and know this ain't nothing new to me. Definitely, and people being critical of anything it is that I was doing, right? But yeah, I think more that though comes from just, look, the position that I'm in, right? You go and you make almost $4 million, you be a plum fool if you don't think that you're going to be hyper focused on from anybody,
Right,
maybe
yeah.
rightfully so, right? People are going to criticize you. People are going to do all of that. It doesn't matter who it is that you are. You can be the nicest individual. You can be rough around the edges like I am. Doesn't really matter. That should be an anticipation. But it's something that I think is welcoming. At least for me, I welcome that, because it really cements where we're at. This is something that people highlight and emphasize because of the position that the Rippaverse is in. And yeah, it's something that you got to kind of welcome. But come from the music game, that's all. That's all. It's critique.
Right. I mean, if you
criticized by your fellow, come on, like, so it's like nothing new.
If you've ever done a showcase in Nashville, you know what it's like to take criticism.
Yeah, it's nowhere around.
Yeah, you don't take anything personal, and so yeah, well, there are some critics out there that say that you don't know how to take criticism.
Yeah.
So you do get a lot, and I see this a lot with, and you said it, any level of success will bring people along that will hate you for no reason whatsoever, no matter how nice of a guy you are. To some people out there, I'm a villain, and I think for me, I've had to realize that I have to be okay being the villain in somebody else's story. What's some of the things how do you deal with the mental and emotional stress of having just the onslaught of people come at you all the time on social media like that?
Well, I mean, again, this all is attributed to the fact that I've been around and been in the public eye since I was 15, 16 years old in some way. So it's nothing to me. It's with the the explosion of the Rippaverse, it is to a different degree than anything that I've done, right? It's bigger, right? I've been in very successful bands, but this is a completely different animal, right? And it's it's one of those things that you gotta take the positive with the negative as well. And I look at it like, look, they only do this to stuff that they care about, right? In some way, maybe they don't like you. That could be one thing, but in other ways, like nobody's being hyper critical of things they don't give a shit about. It's just not how it works.
True.
So I take that and I value that, right? That again, we are in the position where people care enough about our material to do things like that. And it's it is quite interesting because there is this sort of false narrative that goes around, and it's largely centered around me dismissing one person's that doesn't like comics, right? Has a history of making fun of people that read comics or are part of that culture, and they got their critique, and I use that term loosely, dismissed. And out of that, a false narrative came about. People that perpetuated it, it is what it is. That hey, Eric July somehow cannot take criticism. Now, the reason why it's especially moronic is because I'm in no position to not take criticism. So I don't even know where the hell how anybody can think that is a legitimate position. But emotionally, I've been here. Like that's why it's not much to me. I've been doing music and I've been doing it independently. So, it's one thing to be behind some like a mega corporation or behind have some sort of backing in that regard that kind of shields you from that, whether it be like a label with music or something. I didn't have that. I've never had that at all with anything it was that I've ever done. So when it came to people being critical of my music in some kind of way, or how we even put on a show, we get the brunt of that directly, and I have to see it all. I'm fine with that. So I've built up a big tolerance for that. But also, again, you take the good with the bad. There's going to be those that they like what it is that you're doing, and part of being a businessman is analyzing what they want more of and what they want less of. So you have to hear that. You got to get that feedback. That's why we do creative things with our buyers, whether it be with the polls, and we're very, very responsive. I mean, that's the reason why Gooding gets his own book, despite him not really being a focus. It's because of that audience sort of feedback and what they want more or less of. So that's also with the criticism that comes from those that absolutely are somewhat interested in what it is that you're doing. They're going to offer some valuable things. Right. They want more of this, or you want less of this, and you got to be able to. It's important, actually. It's vital that you hear those guys out, because those are the ones that are buying your material.
Yeah. So I got kind of two follow-ups with that there from there. The first is kind of an observation that I've noticed with anyone in the public eye that does receive a lot of criticism. I feel like they almost become hypersensitive to that, and like even like comments or jokes that are not intended to be taken as hypercritical come across feeling that way. Do you ever feel yourself feeling that way? Oh man, maybe that was just a joke and I took it wrong.
I mean, for me, it's like, I feel like I can recognize it when I can recognize it, but in the same respects, things are different, right? And that may be difficult for a lot of people to understand, but man, once we made $1 million in 30 hours, everything changed. Everything.
For a lot of people, honestly.
Yeah, for so many people, right? So I approach business differently because I have to, right? It's no longer just Eric July and his opinions on an individual thing. Now it's, well, Eric July now employs dozens of employees and contractors, that he has to worry about, that they have to get paid. They have to continue to get work. So I have to approach it differently. And this is something that I've had to learn over the last year and a half as well. And navigating that, I can't be as interactive as I once was, because number one, I don't have the time, but also it's not really conducive to building this company. Right. So it's like, I don't do the whole back and forth with folks like that anymore. Right. I had to stop that because, well, for one, again, it's not aiding me really in any capacity. And it can be a big time sink. Right. So, I don't have debates on my, channel. I'm not even streaming as much as I did. I'm only streaming one time guaranteed a week. right, with 4K and Shake every Monday. But outside of that, it's other stuff that I'm doing is working with the Rippaverse. And look, I can totally understand where people see that shift and they feel some kind of way about it. But this is the way that it has to be. When you get in this position, you got to make that adjustment.
Yeah, it's a total time waster to be out there on social media.
Oh, yeah.
CJ, thank you so much for the super chat. We appreciate it. Thank you for flipping us. CJ says, hail Luke, hail Rippaverse. Thank you guys for what you've done for the comic book industry. We do appreciate your thanks very much. And for me, it's my pleasure. Got another super chat also. Go ahead. Got to flip that bird one more time, guys. Genuine Comics would like to know, what is the idea behind Isam's costume design? Is there any thought into that?
It was actually very orchestrated. I wanted to give him a feel that was a bit of a throwback, right? More simplified look, a bit of familiarity. That was the design that we were going with. Obviously, it's kind of this form of eye on his suit. It is the more kind of, what they say, tights or whatever is more of the approach with him. But that was because we were trying to give him something that's, like, let's say, recognizable. We recognized that a lot of people that were going to be coming into the Rippaverse were newbies, right? That maybe had never picked up a comic in their life, but also there were those that maybe come from an age of, back in the gap, they're comic book lifers. Maybe they kind of fell out of liking with the current industry. So I wanted to try to do something fresh and try to do something new, but also when you see it, at least with his suit, there is some level of familiarity. So that's why his design is a more simplified look in comparison to something like a Yairo or a Blood Ruth. It was very, very coordinated, and I designed the suit myself. There's this joke always going around about this Eric sketch because I did originally sketch it, and I am not much of an artist. People know that. That's
you should auction that off.
Yeah, it's a thing that's floating around. Only two people have seen it, myself and my concept artist Marcos. But yeah, it is terrible.
That's something to frame and keep in your office.
Yeah. So I gotta ask this because there's always people talking. Is Isam, is he a self-insert? Is Avery you?
No, no, it couldn't be me. Not even close. I guess if people want to call it a self-insert because he's from Texas, but in the same respects, I guess this white woman behind me is also a self-insert in some kind of way because they're all based out of Flores Park. But yeah, that's another weird one for me because I don't live anything like Isam, right? I don't have my own ranch. I don't live on a ranch. I don't have a sister or anything. My relationship with his parents is much different than what mine is, and what motivates him and what he aspires to kind of be is far different from myself. He's a lot more let's say if you read Isam 1 especially, he's a lot more irrational than what I like to think of myself as.
I did read Isam 1, and personally, I didn't really I wasn't really understanding his motivation. It felt like Avery really got into the fight mostly because he got dissed.
Yeah.
And that didn't resonate a lot with me, right? But outside of that, I thought the book was pretty good. There was a lot of criticisms like, hey, Eric, you needed an editor. You need, this or that. So you took all this money you made and you decided to invest it in this business. Chuck Dixon, Mike Barron. You've got on the art director of Kanan White, who's done some covers for me. Another Hoosier, actually the one that got me into drawing digitally on a tablet instead of traditionally by watching his videos way back when. And so you've decided to take this money and not just invest it in warehousing and things like that, but in staff. And somehow you took the criticism of the people to surround yourself with people that knew what they were doing in making comics so you can make the next books better and better and better, right? But yet you still got criticism for that. But what was the thought pattern behind at what point did you say, wow, this is successful and this is what I'm going to do? Walk us through that choice.
Well, that was an immediate choice. As far as what it is that, and by the way, just to correct some things for the record, Rippaverse has never not had editors. Again, it's one of those things that things float around out there. Maybe you didn't think they did. Some people didn't think they did a job that they feel is good enough. But Rippaverse has never not had editors. All we've done was add more of them to the company. But yeah, like that's what criticism kind of shows up. I think this social media thing has people addicted to this whole dressing down of people. And that's unfortunate. That really is, because that's not how the real world actually works, right? Definitely with businessmen, when they see something that is a problem, oftentimes they're not going to sit up here, hey, let's fire up a stream and let's go through each and everything that someone had a problem with that we address. That's just not how business in general works. You see it often in the form of market corrections, or their business, and corrections there. And that's what it is that we did almost immediately. Like, I'm no fool. I recognize that if something like this is going to last, you have to surround yourself with people that know what it is that they're doing, and you got to definitely, as a businessman and or the owner of it, your job as a leader is to put people in positions to succeed and watch them go be great, right? And that's exactly what it is that we did over here. So we expanded, to your point, with the warehouse. Of course, that was a big part of it, because we are our own distributor, if you will. So that was a big part of it as well. But creatively, I mean, our team is like, I don't know, triple the size of what it was when ISOM first came around. And the creatives that are involved. They're not just contractors, right? With Chuck's involvement, he is very much like involved in the Rippaverse, the stuff that he's doing, plenty of stuff that he's doing that's unannounced, and he's a part of like that creative core that is help building this whole entire thing. And who better than to have someone help and mentor me, especially as a creative and especially as a storyteller, than someone like a Chuck Dixon. I'm compared to like a Chuck and a Mike, obviously, and even the Saskas, right? I'm a spring chicken, right? So I'm just getting going. And I recognize that. And that's, again, where you see the criticism. I think with some people, because, again, going back to social media, if they don't see it immediately, they think that it's not being addressed. And that's that kind of narcissism at play there. But again, that's just not how it works. The point is to get better and improve as a company. So be it as a creative, as a writer, you see improvement from book to book, but also in how we handle our business. Our web Alpha Core is the greatest so far, right? The best campaign that we've had from an efficiency standpoint. That only happens if you're addressing problems, right? So even with the book, with it having very minimal errors on the book itself, I'm really, really proud of the editorial team with what it was that what they did with Alpha Core, especially considering how detailed his work is. And Joe Bennett, they did a phenomenal job. Website didn't crash for the first time. It did not crash. So I'm very, very happy about that. And, even with addressing simple stuff like shipping, right? Like that all comes from the audience feedback. And like, I have a problem with this. Okay. Myself, Alex, we go talk about this and we try to find a solution. So that's how you see the criticism get addressed. Especially the ones that come from people that just want to see us be great. They know we're not perfect. They let us know what gripes it is that they have, and we make sure we get those addressed in the form of building our company. And if it means bringing in people externally to now work with us, that and it could, because a position opened up because there was a market need for it, like what we have with Kanan White as an art director, so be it. Kanan has elevated everybody here, all of our artists here, even Joe. Like, these guys have been around the block. He's elevating all of them. One of the
he's quite talented.
He's obviously he's incredible as an artist, but even especially as a teacher, like he is able to say, okay, this is wrong. or not necessarily wrong. It's like, okay, this could be better, but this is why. And he can express that and explain that in a way that I never ever could to the artist, and then they could make a better product because of that. And that was a hole we needed. That we had more of the creative editors as well as, like, you know, guys that are editing copies, but we needed another eye. We have like our illustrators and like Igor and such, but we needed another professional eye, and that's why we brought in Kanan. And I can't speak to people will see, just he has elevated these artists so much. It's amazing.
Your editor is in the chat. And,
shout out. There's Andrew.
And says that I'm pretty impressed with the editing on Alpha Core #1, if they do say so themselves.
Yeah, he helped work on that for sure. He got elevated and kind of popped into this editorial role. But yeah, it's the best edited book that we've had so far. And that, again, it goes back to the market need and the market demand and what the customers were rightfully making sure that they wanted us to get addressed, and that's what we did.
So I got a question, if it's okay, Luke.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Sure. So on these like submission process for your like you're talking about finding artists and such, we have like a number in the community, or if you want to call it a community of different artists that we hang around with. Someone brought up the question about the submission process being like essentially had like an art contest in a sense. And they were confused as to why there's like no other additional submission kind of thing where like, so you can still show sequential art as opposed to just like a one-off like contest. So why'd you go that route instead of a more traditional kind of like Marvel or DC kind of situation? And
well, yeah, with our like submissions, like, first of all, legally, like, you get in a lot of fucking trouble with that type of stuff, especially people just soliciting stuff to you. So lawyers will like automatically stay away from that. But obviously, you want to make sure that you're doing something that can showcase talent. But the fan art contest was more of or has been, even though we have found some, uber talented people throughout the fan art contest, that was a way to get our audience involved. We know we have an audience of creative guys, and that was a way for them to showcase their talent, right? And Michael, who won it, right? This past year, he's getting put on an interior project, which I can't wait for people to see that. That's it's amazing. In addition to, of course, just getting paid. All the winners got paid. All four of them, I think we had in this last one. They got paid something. But that's not what the fan art contest is necessarily designed to do. The way that we kind of go scout talent, and we're very active, right, in scouting talent. We see it. If I go to a con, I have these discussions with artists and such. But it's like you got to watch that submission stuff with just from a legal standpoint, and just having people just send stuff there. We kind of stay away from that. And we try to come up with other creative ways. People have seen my post. I'm like, hey, it was a guy, I won't announce him, that got a gig out of that post that I did. For example, I was like, what artists would you like to see do some work for the Rippaverse? And somebody got a gig out of that, right? So we try to find these creative ways to generate enthusiasm as well. See who's also enthusiastic or would love to work with us is kind of our approach with getting new artists, and we found a lot of awesome ones.
I'll double back around on kind of that topic later, and I think I'm going to get a little out of sequence for myself today. But I was curious, when you're bringing on these collaborators. Obviously, this is a world that you're building in your head, right? Like this is something you've been thinking about for a while. How do you determine how much of that to give away to the collaborators and let them be able to take and do it themselves without stepping in and micromanaging the hell out of it?
Well, you bring in professionals first and foremost that can leave the egos sort of at the door. And that's what everybody here did. We're all working towards the same goal, for starters. But I think it helps because I have really, really thought about the creative stuff long before anybody got here. So how can I expect someone else to know what to do if I don't? So I built this universe Bible, and it gave us a great launching point for the people that were getting, like with Chuck and Mike and the Saskas and people that are involved creatively, so they have a point of reference. We can give them hell, that's why I brought in the Soskas, because it was becoming too much to manage all of the universe Bible. So they got brought in, and they help kind of as lore masters manage a lot of that. So look, the way that I don't define creative freedom as an absolute free for all. I don't think there's not much creativity in that anyway. The way that I would define it is that there are going to be rules, there are going to be sort of expectations, there are going to be confines, and the creative people are able to come up with fresh things that are appealing within those individual confines, right? So we talk about continuity being a very, very important thing for us with the Rippaverse. So, we're all on the same page with that. Chuck's on the same page. Because we have our creative meetings where we're meeting up. What's happening in the books that you're writing? What's not happening, for that matter? And is it appropriate for me to do X, Y, and Z? And there's no need for me to micromanage, because everybody understands what it is that they bring to the table. And I think the best example that we have working example right now is Alpha Core, right? On cover C, there's 5 characters on there. I created all of those. Outside of that, if you read Alpha Core, Chuck Dixon created every single one of those characters, the characters that are tied to Alpha Core, the villains. He did all of that, right? And it was within, and he's a professional, right? He asks these questions because he's actually intrigued by it. He's not trying to write Brian Solari to be Chuck Dixon. That's not his approach. His approach is, who is Brian? Who is Braxwell? Who is Ingrid? I need to put them in a scenario that is fresh again, and it makes sense, but those characters need to be those characters. So he's an absolute professional, and it makes it very easy to work with, but in a certain respects, and that not only applies with the creative stuff. I argue that applies maybe even more so with like the other stuff, like the other general business stuff. Why in the hell would I have you here if I have to micromanage you? What is the point? What is the point of me having someone here if I don't trust them to do their jobs? If I don't trust them to be able to be great, there's no point of them being here. So there's no micromanaging here. My job is to set people up for success and allow them to be the greatest that they can possibly be. And that's just our overall approach here at Rippaverse.
Right. So I want to go back to a question that Hojo asked earlier. He asked, what was the impetus to finally making your own comic? So you're doing the commentary stuff, and more of it was becoming about how really crappy mainstream was becoming. I mean, you saw your boy Zach was doing all kinds of commentary on it and everything. So what was the thing that said, you know what, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, and I'm going to do it? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, we've been in comics as long as I've been in comics. I think everybody has kind of this dream to maybe even work with Marvel or DC and to do something in the comic book sphere. And because my contribution to that would be as a writer, it's something that I had always dreamed of doing. And honestly, in doing it the way that we did it with the Rippaverse, I thought this was something that I wasn't going to be able to do until I was way older than what it is that I am now. And the process everything accelerated because, to your point, comics weren't in a good spot, which meant that the demand was rising, right? Where people were not pleased, let's say that, with the material that was being put out there by the folks that they entrusted, Marvel, DC, maybe some of these other major publishers. So I looked at it like, okay, well, there is probably not going to be a better time in my lifetime than right now to get out there and create, because the demand is as high as it's probably ever going to be. And also I'm set financially to be able to do this, right? It was a risk, make no mistake. I felt it. Every time I reached into that savings to spend some money, I'm like, this is going to hurt. And I got to justify this with my wife because we're spending a lot of money here. And it worked. Obviously, it paid off. And I wanted to do it a particular way, but that was the process. I'm a businessman at the end of the day. Like, this ain't my first rodeo by any means, and I'm always looking at the market, and I'm always looking for opportunities. And I felt this was a great one. This was an industry that I knew, and if I didn't know aspects of it, I could find out about it. And I said, you know what? Let's give it a shot. Let's just give it a shot. And I want to give a big shout out to everybody. It doesn't matter if you didn't like it. Get Nice. That was that meant a lot to me, obviously, and that just changed my life. It quite literally did that. That campaign being as successful as it did changed everything for me, and I'm so appreciative.
I definitely think it's life before and after ISOM, isn't it?
Oh yeah. Oh, 100%. I think it'll always be things that look. Yeah. That's a serious point, right? Because a lot of things changed, and my approach, even the content, has just changed. And some people aren't going to be able to. I'll always be the commentator, right? Like, to some people, I'll always be a musician. To some people, like, I get asked every day when it's backwards coming back, and we'll be back soon enough, doing some music. So that's exciting. But like, yeah, it is life before and after ISOM. So much is just changed, and it had to. It had to. You became the owner of a multi-million-dollar business. You went from not having that, and it happened like that, literally 30 hours, overnight. Everything just shifted. I'm like, oh shit, like I got to bring people in. I got to turn my part-time guys to full-time guys. I got to hire this, got to hire that. Like, so much change. And also my approach. This is why I'm not as back and forthy with people that despise me as much as I used to be back in the day, because
do you miss that?
No, okay. To be completely honest, no. It was fun while it lasted, being as interactive as I was. And it was a way to, have a cool, I try to do it in spots, right? Definitely when I used to do live debates on my show, like that wasn't an everyday thing. That was something that we did every once in a while. And it was fun when we did it every once in a while to debate other big creators, as far as like talking about politics and everything. And that was fun. But, God put me on this earth to create. That's what I believe. And he's shown me this by blessing me every time that I've done something creatively. The most success that I've ever seen in my life up until before the Rippaverse was the music, right? Like, Backwards is a Billboard charting band, and not just a Billboard charting band. We were the number 2 Heat Seeker album. We had the number 2 Heat Seeker album on Billboard. Veracity did. And we did it independently. That was huge. And that was the most success that I had up until then. And then now we have another creative project with the Rippaverse. So I don't miss it, but at all. I don't got the time to miss it. Like, there's no resting anymore. But it was cool while it lasted. Like, I met a lot of cool people along the way. But now things have changed. Now I'm in charge of this business, and that has to be the focus.
So when I say life before and after ISOM, not just for you, I think it's for a lot of people. Obviously, you didn't get any mainstream comic book news coverage at all. They almost want to ignore the fact that it even happened, and that it wasn't actually real, right?
Yeah.
So we talked about that a lot here on this show, because we've been covering. I mean, that's typically what we do when we don't have a guest. We just cover the news and give our opinions, because we like to hear ourselves talk. And no lies. That's what we do. So one of the things that you did, I think you inspired a lot of people not only to get back into comics or even to try it themselves, but you actually inspired this guy here. You know that I'm the founder of Fund My Comic. It's a crowdfunding platform. I saw what you were able to do on your with your own platform, uncancelable, that kind of thing. And we wanted to do something where people maybe didn't have the resources or the financial ability to take those kind of risks. Right. So that even inspired us. But and I do want to say thank you, My Sketchbook 340, for the super chat. And let's go ahead and make that bird dance. It's a nice little stretch break every time that comes up. So they're asking, and this was one of my questions as well. Maybe not exactly like this, but I was curious, what made you choose to build your own site rather than do a pre-order through a traditional crowdfunding platform like Indiegogo or Kickstarter that so many other people use?
Well, I couldn't make sense of it. Not for me. That was the look. When I approach business, I analyze. I see what everybody else is doing. I understand what like the industry standards are. So I'm looking at all these new, like, obviously with crowdfunding, it lowered the barrier of entry, right? Like for everybody, and that was an option. And then obviously have the traditional route that people would utilize in the direct market. So I'm analyzing all of it, and I couldn't make sense of any of it. So I figured, like, okay, well, I need to do something that's more of a what makes the most sense for me. And I couldn't justify like utilizing Indiegogo because, again, I had the startup money, and it's like, am I going to give these people this platform fee if I don't need it? Because if they take 5% of, like, now in retrospect, yeah, it's easier for me to say, yeah, I made the right decision, because whatever 5% of $3.7 million is, I didn't pay that for my servers and all that. I can tell you that much. It didn't cost me that much.
Yeah.
So it was a worthwhile investment for sure. But that's really what it boiled down to. For me, it just didn't make sense. So I decided to take what I did love about, like, it's a hybrid, right? Like, you see crowdfunding and it has the transparency, and I really always love that. And I was like, all right, well, I'm going to take that element of it, but treat it like it's like just more of a pre-order, and do it on my own platform, so I don't have to worry about the shenanigans, right? Of other platforms. And I never wanted to deal with that. It would be a nightmare in case if I did deal with that. So I said, let's try to avoid the problems instead of having to deal with them when they get here. So that was why we did it. And again, it made sense for me because I had the investment initially, because I'd saved all that money. So it was like, it's easier for me, and it doesn't make sense for maybe for other people, but I had the hundreds of thousands of dollars to invest in all what I did. So there was no point in me like doing a crowdfund, because I didn't need to do a crowdfund. So that was more or less the reason why I did it. And to answer the super chatters statement, again, false narratives. And I would argue that this one is especially stupid. No disrespect, because of the just sheer amount of crowdfunds that we've discussed, and how I've always talked about how it lowered the barrier of entry, and how it's always been a net positive for the industry. So again, just one of those things that you got to be fishing for something if that's a conclusion that someone came against. And if there's a rumor that I'm publishing Yellow Flash's book, I'm guessing that's that'd be
Yellow Flash.
No, I'm not publishing Yellow Flash. I don't know. I know as much about Yellow Flash's book as y'all know about Yellow Flash's book and what he said publicly. Him and I have not talked about that. We don't publish other people's work. So either way, like,
I know his artist. He's a good friend of mine.
Yeah. Yeah. And he won 4th place in the Rippaverse. No, 2nd, 4th. What am I talking about? He won 2nd. He almost won it. The Rippaverse. No, it's the ISOM 2, the ISOM 2 fan art contest. Shout out to him. But yeah, I don't know jack diddly about any of that. That's on them. He's doing it whatever way that he wants to do it. But yeah, crowdfunding. Anybody saying, I'm sorry, that is a false narrative, but it's a especially stupid one, and just the evidence that's out there. My position on crowdfunding.
Yeah. Okay. Well, glad to clear that up, because obviously we support it around here. Got a vested interest. I do thank you for supporting the campaigns that were on there the other day. I know they appreciate it very much as well. And so seeing you do what you were doing with Rippaverse, with the website and everything, and knowing that the fees are just ridiculous on the other places, 5%, and these companies don't care about comic books whatsoever. And, seeing that, it really inspired us to build a platform, lower the fees, make it to where it was accessible to everybody. And it's still a work in progress. I mean, we're kind of building as we go and add new features and functionality as we go. And oddly enough, even in the process where people were asking for an alternative, we have received quite a lot of odd criticism and just random people like getting upset about some of the most mundane and ridiculous things. And again, kind of finding those things to complain about that maybe don't really even exist. And I think it's funny, but you mentioned earlier that, working in comics, working in music has kind of prepared you. But I think, comics is can be a particularly toxic environment. At the same time, it can be an absolutely amazing environment to be a part of.
Toxic. Try stand up, man.
Stand up. That's even worse. Yeah.
That's
you're not doing stand up next, are you?
Nah. I'm good on that. I'm not much of a comedian.
All right. So in the process of this kind of building the Rippaverse, you decided to make a book. Did you do the lore Bible first?
Yeah, that was the first thing I did. First thing we did, that was before anybody even knew that the Rippaverse was a thing. I spent the year or so like building the universe Bible with all the characters. Yeah.
All right. So what was the next step after that? What was?
Well, it
phase
was
two?
it was getting everything in order legally if I was going to take this seriously. So I knew that was the bridge that I had to cross. I have some phenomenal lawyers, which some people found out how good they are as of recently. But yeah, we had some things that we needed to get our ducks in a row. So that was making sure all our I's were dotted, T's were crossed. That was my approach there. And, you know, we had some guys that we had brought in along the way, but it was we took care of business. We wanted to launch and we wanted to take it serious. So I was doing everything that you can think of that comes with putting out a comic book, talking to printers, talking to the parcel companies, or rather who's going to ship the product. All of those conversations were being had prior to it launching, because I wanted as much as I could be prepared for. I needed to have ready, and it took a minute, right? It took a little bit to get there, and we got there, and we finally launched it. And shout out to the audience; they came out great enthusiasm for ISOM #1. And it's funny how that just created a whole bunch of more problems because it was far more successful than I ever could have imagined, which came with this, like, now we're dealing with the issue of volume, right? And with us being our own distributor, you can see our own, we fulfill our own products. You can see how that could become an issue, and we had to change. It went from, I think I'll sell a couple thousand books to, okay, now I'm having an account for 60,000 books. That's a different animal. And that's not even including all the other individual items, shirts, posters, cards.
Right. We love merch.
Yeah, all of that. The volume is, I think, what created arguably the biggest challenge post-launch that I wasn't ready for, because I mean, who can expect to? I would have had to been real cocky to think that I was ever going to make $3.7 million. That wasn't on the table. That wasn't even considering that was an option. And then it happened. So it created a far more problems. But I am grateful, and I'm blessed to had a team around me that we had, because we got through that. I was working 6-7 days a week, packing the hell out of these orders. But it was a humbling experience, that's for sure. But we were prepared. We were able to roll with the punches, and of course, we got into the position that we're in right now, where we can handle. We make hundreds of sales every single day, even on non-campaign days, and we're able to fill that without any sort of issues. So it's and that was a process that took a lot of learning, let's say that, because it hit us like a freight train, man, going in ISOM 1.
So we launch ISOM 1. We go to bed. We wake up the next day.
Did you go to bed?
The numbers? Yeah. Did you go to bed? First off,
no, it was no time to breathe, man. Like I was like, first of all, I was in a state of shock for sure, because I didn't anticipate that, but I didn't have time to celebrate. Right? I was like, wow, we just made $1 million in 30 hours, and I'm like, oh wow, we just made $1 million in. That means a whole lot of things.
You're thinking taxes.
I'm thinking all of that stuff, and I'm like, what
is it? More money, more problems.
Yeah, that's what they say, and that's exactly what it was. So I didn't have a lot of time to celebrate. And again, I think that just speaks to the team that we've built around here. This is not a one-man army by any means here, man. My warehouse guys, the creatives that are behind the scenes, man, they did a lot, man, to make this happen. We had a lot of challenges, website issues, server problems that we had to work through. It was a lot of problems, man, and we got through all of it. We got through all of it. So again, that's a real testament.
You had a site crash on day one, right?
It sounds like you had 99 problems.
Yeah. That's true.
Sorry.
Yeah. And yes, it did. It did crash on day one. It did crash on which it would have hit $1 million prior to the 30 hours had it not crashed.
So what kind of chaos did that generate in Rippaverse headquarters?
Oh my God. It was, well, I'm pacing around the warehouse because it's like, I don't know what to do. Right. It's not necessarily I didn't know. When I say I don't know what to do, it was less like, oh, well, I couldn't come up with an answer for this. It's like, what problem do you try to address immediately? Right. You got this problem. I got to scale up like overnight, basically. So I'm trying to figure out how do I approach it, prioritizing these issues that have come up, in addition to getting the damn site to work. So, I'm working with the tech team, website team, like trying to figure out all these issues. Got database problems, got all this other stuff that we haven't deal with because of the sheer amount of traffic that we just weren't prepared to handle. We thought we were, but we weren't prepared to handle any of that stuff. So yeah, it was just trying to figure out attacking one thing at a time. It very much was a division of labor situation where everybody had their projects that they were working on that we had to deal with. And we got through it. We did get through it. The site eventually got to working. And now we got it ready to rock. And we are going to be overhauling our site very, very soon, even more so in the next few months. But we got through it, man. We really did. I'm so proud of my team, man. Those guys did a phenomenal job.
When you crashed, we immediately had people say, well, is Fund My Comic going to have the same problems? And I go, well, I don't know, but I hope not. But we hire a development firm out of Canada that actually handles all of our hosting and development and everything. And so when I want something done, I just pay them, right?
There you go.
And so they handle it because I'm a comic book guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the comic book business, comic books is only one half of that. Business is the other half of that. A lot of these guys that are creative, they don't really come into it with a business mindset. They have to learn the business.
Got in trouble mentioning that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're going to get in trouble mentioning that because some people don't want to think about that aspect of it because it's not the easiest part. So you said that you had to figure out what you were going to address first. What in your instincts, the business instincts from doing what you've been doing, how did you prioritize the things to fix instead of letting the chaos of that moment crush you?
Well, it was I wanted to take care of the customers first. Like, so their experience was one of the things that I was like, okay, well, the site has to be number one, because not just about us bringing in money. It's just that you have all these people that have been waiting around. They're stoked. We gave them a time. We wanted this to work out. Maybe we had to deal with all sorts of just craziness. So I'm thinking like, okay, we'll worry about all the other stuff at some point, and we'll make sure we get that addressed. But getting the customer there, the good experience that they expect, just because we're a smaller company in size, that has nothing to do with, people want a general good checkout experience, no matter who they're buying from, right? So we had to get that addressed. And I'm like, customers are going to make this thing go round. They're the ones that are allowing us to be in the position that it is that we're in. So we need to make sure that we take care of them. So that was priority number one, for sure. All the back end stuff, the logistics stuff, which can be a nightmare, we dealt with it. But front facing, customer facing, everything there, we needed to make sure that we addressed that first. Any questions? We had our help desk team. Everybody's working, rocking and rolling, and we worked as a team. I had to cuss a couple people out, but that's how it works. Sometimes you got to light a fire under folks. Not within my team. I'm talking externally to get stuff working. Right? It's just one of those that comes with the territory. So it was about the customers.
So are your web guys in-house or out-house?
They're in-house now. Let's just say that.
I said it that way on purpose.
Yeah, we're outhouse.
Yeah. They're in-house now.
Outhouse sounds like a good idea, but there's a lot of flies involved. So don't do outhouse.
Yeah. It like initially we had a couple guys that we had worked with, and they built sites for me before, but volume it changes so much, man.
It really
like
does.
It's like it's different when you're considering a couple of people, dozens of people at a time. It's a different when it's like that turns to hundreds or that turns into thousands. Like the sites just have to function differently. They have to prioritize certain things. What's firing off here? All that has to be fundamentally changed. So we went into it, and this is not necessarily anybody's fault, but we how can you expect to make $4 million or almost $4 million?
No.
Like that we didn't go into it with
No
that.
comic book independently has done that before.
That's what I'm saying.
but in any business, that sounds insane. Like, I'm making $4 million.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You wait, you'll see.
I'll make $4 million in 30 days. No big deal.
Nobody's thinking that way, and we didn't obviously. But yeah, because we were not prepared to handle that volume, it just created a chain of other issues, right? And we had to learn. It was like learning along the way before we eventually got to where we're at now, where I mean everything's good. Like we did have this is the first campaign that we had zero crash. There were no issues whatsoever with the site, and yeah, that came with learning. But yeah, we had to. I kept everything is in house for the most part here. That's the way we deal with it. But now, even more so after that site went down, I was like, okay, well, I gotta have a little more internal support there. And that we worked hard to go into ISOM 2 to build that. And we still had some kinks to work out. But by Alpha Core, we got it all worked out. We know who needs to get contacted. We know everything top to bottom.
That's a pretty quick learning curve to get that figured out. So I do commend you for that because, I'm a firm believer that you can glean wisdom from anybody that's doing anything at any level of success. And so when we watched what was going on with the ISOM #1 campaign, we made sure that our developers knew to load test so we're on our own servers and under some heavy security. And we said, look, we want to make sure that we're load testing this at 10,000 people, 10,000 hits a minute, right? Or whatever. And so they load tested the servers even before we launched to make sure that we were not going to have traffic hiccups, anything like that. And even doing that, we still don't know once we actually have live and it's not 10,000 bots, on a load test, right?
Yeah.
Because, it's different. It's still a different beast. So we're as prepared as we can, but we have not had traffic issues, and we've had quite a bit of traffic on the site. Still nothing to the levels that you saw basically overnight, which was very, it was exciting to watch.
Yeah.
I was very disappointed about was that it wasn't covered. And then there was people that complained that it was, you didn't follow the normal,
the rules and regulations,
the standard ways to do it. Yeah. Right. So in that, we are always, especially right now, we've been covered in the news. We see from ICV2, they're talking about, can the direct market be saved? There's all kinds of concern about modern comics and how they're doing. We're seeing manga is doing really, really well, but our traditional floppies aren't. And people are kind of back and forth with all of this stuff. And they keep saying that we need innovation. We need innovation, right? Well, it seems like the direct market and comics as usual is on a course to just go right straight over the cliff without any change, right? So you did some things that were innovative. What talk us through that process of like what sparked some of these ideas?
Yeah, well, again, I have to before, especially if I'm spending money on it, I got to make it make sense. Like I'm not one of those guys that just like I just throw money at it and hope it's I like, all right, if I'm gonna be reaching into my pockets, paying somebody or paying for something, I need to make sure that this is legit and I have to make sense of it. And if I can't make sense of it, I just won't do it. Especially the bigger that number that gets, the bigger that number gets, the more I'm like that. Okay, it's like I can't make this make sense. And I did a lot of research that I feel like it hasn't really been done because your average comic guy doesn't even know how this whole direct market thing actually works, to be completely honest. Like that flies right over their head, right? There are creatives that don't really know how it works. Like, so I remember going through this process and doing my research of how Diamond, like, because none of that ever made sense when it was just Diamond. I'm like, how the hell is one company doing basically everybody's thing? None of this makes any sort of sense. And then you start to look at like I'm going decades back, and I'm looking at like the other distribution companies that Diamond ended up basically swallowing to get them in this position. And I'm like, all right, wait a minute. is this even lucrative for these guys? And it just, the way that I see it, and some people aren't going to like it, but it's the honest to God's truth, especially retailers. It was always a paper tiger. Not effectively speaking, just being honest here, especially with Marvel and DC, which made up a majority of this market share, if you will, they are effectively the sugar daddies of the industry, and they have been that way for a very long time. None of this makes any sense. It's a wonder how any of these guys were ever making money, because they weren't ever really making money. It's easy to make money when you're tied to some mega multinational, multi-billion-dollar corporation. You know, I'm not so sure, and I can't say for sure because those numbers are never public, right? You know what sells and you know how much it sells, right? But I'm not convinced with the publication part. Yes, maybe with merchandise, maybe with I don't know, events and parks and others. Yeah, they can make money off of all that. I'm not so sure that with the publication, yes, people got paid, right? But I'm not so sure with the publications they were ever that profitable. I can't. I just me looking at it, I can't make it make sense when you have a setup to where the publisher is getting maybe a third, right, if that, right, of the money that they sell on an individual comic, because they have to take into consideration all these people that are taking money off the top. That goes to then the distributor, right, because they ain't doing it for free. It's not a charity. And then the retailer has to make their money, and they're trying to make all those guys are taking money off the top. And then you go open up a comic, like, I mean, I don't have like one that's near me, like from one of the big guys, and you can see this laundry list of names that are all part of these various projects. And I'm sitting here like, there is no way that y'all are making that much money. There's no way around it, because I even look at it from our perspective and how thin our profit margins can even be. And anybody that does comics independently, whether you crowdfund, especially once you start taking printing into consideration, you know how thin some of these some of these margins are going to be. I'm not convinced they were ever really making money. I just think they were kind of sitting on more of a house of cards, paper. It was a paper type, whatever you want to call it.
I'm going to agree with you 100% on that one, especially when we recently in the last year found out how many companies were not paying artists and had to even Marvel and DC are 3 to 6 months behind on paying invoices. And Randy has a lot to say about Diamond. And go ahead, Randy. Go ahead with the rant if you feel
No. I'm fine.
Randy's about to explode.
I already know.
I actually have a question myself.
I'm good. I'm just sitting here shaking my head up and down as much as possible.
I have a question myself. Like, Eric, like you've been talking about allocating funds judiciously, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why animation though? And caveat,
Pedro, don't jump the gun.
I'm an animator. Okay,
Pedro, we're getting there.
So am I.
Cool your jets. I'm getting there.
So am I.
We still have an hour and a half of this, man. I'm getting there, man.
One step at a time.
Because we got to pull up his website here in a little bit, man.
Yeah, I got you.
I got you.
So I got a question about Eric. So you talked a lot about challenges, right? So I was just kind of curious about your personality, because I'm the kind of person that likes to lean into the things that I find most difficult. Like if I'm like the worst at something, I'll lean into that particular aspect of like whatever I'm terrible at, so I can get really good at it. But I'm also in part a procrastinator, and sometimes I do the opposite of that. So do you find yourself procrastinating, or are you more like right into the challenge?
Nah, I can't procrastinate. There's no room for that. There's no time for it, man. It's for me, I look at challenges like exactly what it is they are. They're obstacles. I'm a very competitive guy. I've been an athlete, and all the way up through the collegiate level. That's something that is just part of my DNA. So I look at problems especially, and I look to go attack it and deal with it. And definitely when you're starting off, it's such a crucial time, because you're trying to figure out and build that foundation, right? So you want to do things right. You want to address problems. If you see it, it's almost like you're an inspector, right? And you want to address these problems as they're building up this house. You want to address these problems like immediately, because once you build everything, and then if that problem becomes a problem, it's going to be way bigger than what it was had you just actually addressed it when you found out that and identified what it is that it was. So For me, it's I don't really have time. My team, for one, wouldn't even allow me to do it if I wanted to. But I don't really have the time to just like, hey, I get around to it. I can't. Like, it's one of those things because you never know, especially with this business. I mean, you get like, especially when we're dealing with like technical stuff. Like, you got to start addressing those problems even when they're not a problem. It's like, oh, we found something, right? We're doing an audit or something, and we find out that something's an issue. We're like, yeah, it's not a problem yet, but it will be. So let's go ahead and get this taken care of.
Little
right
problems
now.
become big problems down the road. Yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah.
Eric Hodson, thank you for the $1.99 super chat. We are going to address this question in a little more depth towards the end of our interview this morning. But just a quick preview. Do you think big things ahead for 10 years from now?
I mean, I'm trying to build this thing to be like a legitimate media company. So in 10 years, I'm hoping to have all of our, let's say be firing on all cylinders with it'll always be a comic book company. That's never going to change. But we want to for sure entertain stuff with Rippaverse Studios, which has been a big investment for us as well. I would love to be in animation. I would love to be in gaming, right? I would love to be in all of that, like legitimately, and really for it to be there. Like, I want this to be a one-stop shop for people that want this kind of entertainment. Right. That's what it is for me. I want this for these people to be able to say, hey, when I want to go be entertained, I want to go over to the Rippaverse, and there's going to be something new for me. There's going to be something I haven't checked out. Maybe it's a new book. Maybe it's new animation. Maybe it's live action. Who knows? Whatever it is. So 10 years from now, that's where I'm hoping that we're at, firing on all cylinders with all things entertainment. I will say this. I will be living a dream if I ever got in a position to make video games off of our content that we make out here at the Rippaverse. I would have felt like I made it in life. 100%.
Very cool. Very cool. Let's go ahead and take a look at, take a little break from that for a second and read another article, shall we?
I just want to let Levi know that we did see his star up there. He contributed to Soul Tech and wants to see the bird dance.
Oh, then let's make that bird dance. We've talked about several times how the speculator market or the investor market, basically, with the multiple variant covers, how that's been part of the inflation in floppies and what we see in I don't want to call it mainstream. They're not mainstream anymore. It's corporate comics. What we've seen in corporate comics lately.
Pretty much the saving grace of corporate comics anymore, it seems, is their crazy variant covers. Crazy amounts.
It appears that now that the manga is making its way into more U.S. markets, that variant covers are coming to manga. Let's read this article here, and I want to get your guys' thoughts on this. With channels and retailers exclusives of Kodansha's Initial D Omnibus, variant covers have not been a prominent feature of the manga scene up to now, but Kodansha Comics may be changing that with its channel and retailer exclusive variants for the first volume of the Initial D Omnibus. Kodansha has announced that the first omnibus volume will have 3 covers: the standard cover for books and all other non-direct market channels, a direct market Crunchyroll exclusive, and I'm not going to say the word. Pedro, what do you got?
Kinokuniya exclusive.
There you go. So that exclusive is also offering an exclusive Shikishi sketchboard with pre-orders while supplies last. The first volume will be released in the book channels on March 19th, 2024, and in the direct market on March 20th with an MSRP of $22.99.
Are they ever going to stop giving the direct market with those variant covers? Like, I understand the variant cover thing, but I don't know. I see it as a scam. Like, why? Like, I know the collectivity of it, but dude, stop.
Yep.
It should be about the content. But
Right on.
hey,
So Initial D was published initially in English in 2001 by Tokyo Pop, which published the first 38 volumes. Comixology and Kodansha picked up the license and completed the series digitally. At Anime Expo 2023, Kodansha announced it would bring the series back into print in a 2-in-1 omnibus edition with a new translation and new covers. What are your thoughts on the variant cover thing?
Before that, is it a 2-in-1 omnibus? Just a bigger omnibus.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
It's wordplay. It's word salad. It's word salad.
Word salad.
You've had some success with variant covers, Eric.
Yeah, we our approach is we do, and I think we have like that balance, right? Because I said I never wanted to go crazy with these variants. It's just
Mess.
The fact that there's these books out here with 20 fucking variants is just that's unbelievable to me. But yeah, so we do one mass print cover, meaning that cover, should everything else sell out, that one cover will be the one that gets constantly reprinted. And then we do usually like some limited, like at least for our campaigns. Once we move away from that format, then it won't make as much sense. But we do like a full kind of option, and then we just limit the prints on the others, and that's it. Like with our, so like we had, so basically it's just transparency. I don't like the idea of look, if people do it, I don't want to say that you can't do this or you shouldn't do it, but I will say is I'm not gonna do it. Like this whole like exclusive sort of variant, retailer variant, all of that, and incentive variants, I especially would never do that. Where people, hey, you got to buy a certain amount of this to get this variant. I never do that. I'm just not a fan. I'm just not a fan. And unfortunately, it became, again, I'm not sure these guys are ever making any money, but they became so reliant on that now. And that's why it's gotten out of control. Like you go look at some of these number ones, man, like that are coming out these days, and how many variants that they have. It is whatever number that you think it is, it's higher than that. There are books out there with 20 plus variants. It's amazing. Like it's unbelievable.
Yep. And I think it encourages people to slab more than read too.
I can see that for sure.
Yeah. So we've talked about business for a while. Let's go ahead and get back into kind of the art of storytelling and the love of comics there. So Eric, what was your first comic? Do you remember?
Well, I'll tell you my introduction to it for sure. So my first introduction was this was early 90s. So Wally was Flash at the time. It's funny talking to Mike Barron and all that. It's kind of funny how all these things come full circle like this. But yes, my mother, she was the one that introduced me to comics, starting with Flash. That was my favorite character growing up. Then it became Batman as I got older. But my relatability to the character was just it being fast, and I know that's, I think that's what it is for a lot of us with when we were younger. It's less about the stories and more about, hey, this character can do really cool things, and I like it.
Yeah.
And it's Flash, and then you start to get older, and you start to appreciate what's the stories that are being told as you can comprehend it. But also, it was coming up in an era where the out of comic book media was, I would argue, at its apex, where you had Batman, arguably. That's what everybody calls the definitive version of Batman. It's Batman the animated series, right?
Right. Yeah.
So that was the thing. X-Men the animated series was doing. This is stuff that was on when I was coming, like Saturdays and getting off school and or Fox Kids, all of that stuff. Where I was the target audience, right? So I was kind of spoiled that was my introduction as well to out of comic based sort of media when I was young. But yeah, but it was Flash. Flash was the first character itself and book that I was introduced. And again, coming full circle and being able to work with Mike Barron is been crazy for me. It's been
Yeah, I always fell in love with it's funny, you know, like one of the first series I really fell in love with as I got older was the Punisher series that he worked on. And then right after him was Chuck Dixon.
Chuck, yeah.
Right? I mean, what a great run between the two of those guys. I mean, you know, and now to see that they're both not only in you know, really kind of in this space and we get the chance to talk to them, but how does it feel working with legends like that and Bennett and
oh yeah, Bennett too. Yeah, no, it's look, for my growth, this is gonna be instrumental. I mean, who better to have, especially Chuck? I mean, Chuck's really tapped in with us as a company. He's working on so many stories. We talk a lot. We talk about what it is that we're doing, and for my individual growth as a storyteller, I've just picked up so much on him, and he's embraced that sort of natural kind of mentorship as well, right? Where he will explain something to me if it makes sense, if it doesn't make sense, and I get to pick up on all of that and soak that information in. So from the company perspective, having Chuck Dixon do a book or Mike Barron do a book is massive. Like there's no doubt about that. You get a unique perspective in how they tell their stories. But just from me soaking up game and soaking up knowledge just as a youngster in this industry is
it's a luxury, actually.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to describe it.
Yeah, we don't all get those, you know, when we first start out. One of the things that we really noticed, especially on this panel, about ISOM #1 was that this was a first-time comic book creator. And, you know, everyone that kind of came at it with the idea, well, it made $4 million. Well, yeah, it made $4 million, but it's still Eric's first book that he's ever done. There's a lot of learning that's going on there. He's not, you know, I probably hasn't written a lot of comic book scripts. You know, there's just a whole lot to the process.
The ins and outs.
That's brand new to him. And it was a very solid first outing for a brand new independent comic book creator. And I think people's idea of the whole thing got a little skewed because of the money that it made. And there were people that really wanted you to fail. And I think when it was successful, it really pissed them off and it really upset them that it was successful. And rather than take inspiration from that and learn from it, they chose to get bitter and sour. Obviously the people here, it inspired us to try to find, well, there's money out there. How do we go get it? You know, people want it, right? But so now in this process of being a new writer, learning how to tell stories and be a storyteller. So you've got these ideas, these thoughts in your head. What are some of the things that you've learned from these guys like Chuck and Mike that's helping you form better scripts?
Well, for sure. It's like I've always been under the impression just with our company setup that we have to play the long game from a storytelling perspective. And that can't be seen by everybody. A lot of people are like, hey, I'm trying to tell the most dramatic, epic story. I'm killing off everybody. I'm doing all of this. And I have to, I got to kind of reel myself in with that and reel everybody else. Cause it's like, we can't look at it. If we really, really want this to be successful, not to pull a George R.R. Martin and write ourselves in a corner, we have to consider 5, 10, 15 perhaps. And if I'm blessed enough for it to exist that long, great. If it doesn't, it doesn't, right? But if it does, we need to be, let's say this, let's handle our business as if it is going to be around for the next 30 years, right? Is the way that we approach it. So Chuck's masterful at that. He's masterful at handling books with so many different characters. Alpha Core highlights that, right? Like Alpha Core, you're dealing with a team dynamic with Alpha Core themselves and all these just all these villains and just people that are part of the story that he's created. So what I had picked up from him specifically, right, and I've told this story before, is about thinking more. Even I was always a long game thinker, but even more so thinking it. There's a story that people will know about soon enough that him and I collaborated on, right? And I wrote everything out. I explained the events, this, and that. Wrote everything out. There was one instance, right? I've told the story before, so I'm repeating myself to some of the guys that maybe in the audience. And there was one part, he was down with everything else, and there was one part that he was like, "Okay, Eric, I can't make sense of this, and here's why. And he starts to go on about how kind of our this. I don't want to NDA myself, so I'm trying to talk around it without
Right. Yeah.
giving away the event, right? But there's something that would be instrumental for our world that we were discussing. And he was like, because of that, and because of the place, time, setting that we're telling the story, this part I can't make sense of this, and here's why. And then he gave me an alternative, right? He said, hey, this is why. You got to consider this because you can run into this problem, that problem, that problem. Okay, why don't we do this though? And then he gave me an alternative and explained why that's a better option, right? So it's the idea of, again, not just thinking for the now. And I have had some grasp of that with just how we approach continuity and all this other stuff. But having Chuck in and his perspective, that's just one of the examples of, even more than what I was doing before, I need to be considering the threads. I need to be considering, like, okay, all these actions, things that are happening in these books, they have these sort of consequences, right? And you have to consider, if you're going to be doing this whole shared universe thing, you have to be considering that and the ramifications, because otherwise it won't make X, Y, and Z make a whole lot of sense. So having him around for that story, people will see it. It's just an example of it. It's man, he's just so, again, instrumental. So what?
I got a
go
question,
ahead.
actually. In the same kind of vein, when you're prepping for your first book, what kind of I guess education materials did you study? Like when I was getting into starting my first book, I basically stuck to Randy like glue. Got on his channel, started my education in comics. He recommended a book, Will Eisner's Guide to Sequential Art. So did you study any of that material when you started, or you just
I mean, I watched it's funny, I was watching Neil Gaiman or Gaiman or whatever talk about like his process of writing stories, and I didn't implement it all because he's a little wonky, right? But it was still informational, right? It was still like informational in terms of his approach. But a lot of what I picked up in storytelling, I just don't think there's really any substitute for just reading great material. Like I just don't like. There's no, people can tell you how to do that, but and that makes all the sense in the world. You need that foundation. I got that foundation. However, when it comes to actually telling that story and watching it unfold, what better than to read some of the absolute classics. Now, granted, I came up in the era. It's funny, we're talking about Chuck Dixon, and about how he was handling the Bat family, how he handled team dynamics was really something that I picked up on even before that he was here, and reading all that material. Some of my favorite things, like I was rereading it again, like the original Crisis on Infinite Earths, and how that to me was just a phenomenal story, but also what it meant for their world and trying to correct some of the issues that the publication actually made, and having 65 versions of the same damn character running around, and it's confusing everybody. And finding a creative way, because that's one of the rare times that you saw really a publisher say, all right, we fucked up, guys. Okay. We're going to fix it. But, you're not just fixing it internally. You have to fix it for the audience. Right. So that was an example of that. And I've always kind of gone back and read some of these sort of classic stories, was what it was that I picked up on. And I don't think there's much of a substitute for that. And it's also a way to continuously, learn. Like, I'm not really reading a whole lot of I mentioned this before, like newer stuff, right? Like, I don't know if there's much there for me there, aside from maybe keeping my hand on the pulse of the industry. But from storytelling, there's so many amazing stories. You can't possibly digest all of that information, and it helps to kind of go through a lot of that and see how their approach was to storytelling.
That's very true. So here on the panel, Randy's been doing comics for 30 plus years. Glenn, 30 plus years. Actually, probably longer than that.
130 years.
130 years for Glenn.
Pretty close.
And he does look the part.
He does,
Seems
yeah.
like
And
it
I've been doing comics for not near as long as these two guys, right? But we've all worked as writers, artists, things like that. There's some mechanical things that you pick up on, and as someone mentioned, the Eisner books. I swear by all three of those Eisner books. They're like
Can't go wrong
textbooks
with
for me
that.
almost daily.
Yeah.
But there's some technical things like in kind of storytelling and stuff like that. Page turners, how best to use a splash page, things like that. What can you talk to some of the stuff that you've learned about the technical aspect of the storytelling from these guys?
Well, absolutely. I mean, especially with it's funny you just mentioned that, like with how to kind of properly do an actual splash page. You know what I mean? I picked up a lot of that from Chuck, and Chuck's creative, right? So Chuck will specifically write with the artist in mind. He'll ask them, and this is something that I picked up from him that I've recently, done with some of the other work that we're working on with some of the other artists that are not like Cliff and some of the other guys. So what he did is genius approach where, he knows you don't often get it. I mean, like initially, like if you write a script, and definitely if you're doing it for a major publisher, who the hell knows who the artist is going to end up being? But when you do know who the artist is, right? He would just ask them, what is your favorite thing to do? Like, what do you think you do well? And I'm going to make sure I do it. And you see that with Alvacore and Joe Bennett. Like him and Joe Bennett are always kicking back ideas, and he has a great relationship. It's not like, hey, yeah, we work together and we're collaborating on this product. It's like, no. You have your strength. You maybe have weaknesses for sure, but we want to play to those strengths. And I'm going to write in a way that accommodates that. So you see these like 2-page splash pages or 2-page spreads. And that's what Joe Bennett absolutely loves to do. But those are in there because Joe and Chuck chatted about it, right? So, you guys know comics are very much a team sport. If you're not doing everything yourself, right, it's very much a team sport. You have all these players from the letter on down to the writer, right? And one thing that I picked up from him is talk to the artist, man. Like not just in the sense, oh, hey, here are the pages, here are the pencil and ink, and what's next type stuff. No, like get what it is. And also you're picking up on that as you're seeing their work, what it is, their strengths and weaknesses, but also having that conversation doesn't help. And I saw that, and I picked up a lot of information on how he handled Alphacore with Joe. A lot of people don't know that obviously that project had been worked on a long time before y'all ever knew about it. This was one of those early things that we greenlit. So I saw the entire process really, really early on within the company of how Chuck and Joe Bennett will conduct themselves, right? So again, I mean, I have that luxury. It's like, hey, yeah, you want to pick up all this information? Well, I got access to a fucking legend that I could just pick up the phone and call and ask him for advice and do all these, and also see him actively how he writes a script, like how Chuck writes a script. I've seen it. I've got to talk with him about it, and again, it's not much of a substitute for that because he's a legend in his own right, one of the most prolific, if not the most prolific in terms of just page count, comic book writer that we've ever seen. I mean, this is a luxury that I have for sure.
Yeah. I've got another question, but first we got to get these super chats. Thank you for flipping us the bird this morning. Welcome, Drunk 3PO. He says, Hail Rippaverse. And we also have
Drunk. What's
Student of God in the house. Welcome. Eric, please bring Luke on your show to talk about FMC. And I don't feel compelled to do that, but if you ever do, I'm more than happy to do it. And so anyway, here's my follow-up for that question that I had. How are you putting all of that into action for ISOM number 3?
ISOM number 3, let's start by saying this is hands down the best. It's the best ISOM up to date, and it should be. That's just the bottom line. The addition of Caden White, as I've said, has elevated Cliff in more ways than I can count. Okay, so he's bringing his absolute A game here. So much that he's improved on, and just because he's been around the block for a while does not mean that he can't learn either, right? And he has elevated his work so much. And you got to understand this from the writing perspective. Now that we're 3 books in, I'm getting to obviously tell the story. It was arc, right? That's the ill-advised arc is what we call it. So there was always this was the plan, right? To do this whole entire thing. But up until now, right? Just the sheer amount of knowledge that I've soaked in this last year and a half has been insane. I've gone into this year more knowledgeable and learned so much about the industry, how to write comics, how to approach storytelling, and like I was saying just previously, just soaked up so much knowledge, and all that is going to obviously be displayed in ISOM 3. And it's also picking up on what people like, because yeah, it was a little bit, because this is our only arc that we have active right now. Like Alpha Core is not part of an arc. Yaibra isn't even part of an arc. And ISOM 1 and ISOM 2 were a change of pace from each other. They are very different books. And picking up on what the audience did or didn't like from it. Most people felt that number 2 was better than number 1, or they maybe enjoyed number 2, which is, again, you want to hear that, but it's most helpful when I understand and know what that means, right? Like, okay, so why did you like ISOM 2 more than you liked ISOM 1? So we want to make sure that we're implementing those ideas, if it makes sense from our storytelling, and having those be present in the future, right? So like a lot of people really like the latter half of ISOM 2, right? This whole, hey, we're gonna go save Sam, and you get to see ISOM be heroic, right? With Blood Ruth, and they're going to save him. And I picked up on that, right? So there's a lot of the actions there. You get all of that in ISOM 3. There's some interesting twists and turns and spins there as well. But all of it's coming together, and what a perfect time. All the knowledge that I've soaked from these legends that have been here, all the scripts that I've wrote and digested, and all of how Cliff, that is, has grown as an artist, is what you're going to see with ISOM 3. And that's how it should be. It's not, the goal is not to be stagnant here. We're in our infancy as far as a company. So yeah, when I hear people say Alpha Core is the best book that's come out of the Rippaverse, that's music to my ears. And hopefully the Yaira is the best one after that. Like we want to just keep improving. Right, we want to keep doing better. That's the goal there.
Yeah, you're really your only competition is yourself yesterday. Mm. At least that's how I look at it. So are we going to get any resolution in ISOM 3 about what is Avery's powers? What is it that he's capable of doing, and anything like that? Are you going to tie up any loose ends for us?
Well, you do see in ISOM, and I always tell people to reread it, especially ISOM 1 in particular, and 2. I mean, to combine, you see kind of a bit of what it is that he is capable of doing. But the resolution for more so ISOM, and I don't necessarily, that's not my approach to storytelling, and you can also see that with some of how Chuck's done, because it's not like in Alpha Core you had 90-some plus pages. And you didn't learn exactly what it is that they were individually all able to do, because to me, that's not from the reader's perspective. That's not the story that we're trying to tell necessarily. Is, hey, what's his powers? What's his social security number? Like that's not the goal here. The resolution more so with ISOM here is, yeah, you're going to learn more about him inevitably. You learn why he quit, for example, in ISOM 2. So you get a little more of some motivational stuff there as well. But you're going to learn more about him, what it is that he can do. But more of the resolutions is, well, we have this issue that popped this whole thing off. What's going on with that? What's happening with Darren Fontano? We saw his, he goes in this cave with Blood Root. What are the ramifications of that, especially when you saw the end of it? So that's what the loose ends are going to be tying, is the story, right? The story, and finding resolutions to that before we move on to the next books, next ISOM books, ISOM 4 and beyond. Let's say that we got to tie this knot, and I think we did it in a way, as people read. I'm not gonna give it away. I think we did it in a way that's going to be very, very fulfilling for them. They're going to really like this outcome.
Yeah, well, I kind of want to double back. Earlier, you said something about, when you're a kid, you really like The Flash. I recently watched the Flash movie. It was really bad, by the way. It was a really bad movie. But talk about these young readers. We didn't really learn so much about the story as we did. It was the characters. Characters, I think in comic books, more than anything, is very character driven. more than plot driven, even, right? So having that in mind, knowing that you're not writing a story to express what these characters are and what they can do and all of the stuff that made Flash interesting to you as a kid, but more telling the story about what made you like Batman as an adult. What do you have any plans of really getting into who the characters are for some of those younger readers, or for people that are out there that might be like, hey, I've read two issues of ISOM and I still don't know what the hell is going on. I don't know what Avery can do. I don't know what his honest motivation is. You know, I feel like I've read, 180 pages and I just don't feel like I'm getting there. What's your comment to those people?
Well, my comment will be, that's not the story that it is that we're telling with ISOM. But to be fair, I admit the same thing with how Chuck told and that wasn't under my direction, by the way, how Chuck told Alpha Core. Like, if you read Alpha Core, did you learn what Brian's powers like exactly were to the T? No. Did you learn that about Ingrid? No. Did you learn that about Braxwell? No, you didn't. It's because we can't look at storytelling through the lens of someone trying to, for lack of better terms, blow the load immediately. Like we could, and if I wanted to tell this uber epic, dangerous story, then yeah, I could give everything away as much as I can. But keep in mind, that's not the game we're playing. That may be the game other people are playing. And this is also something that we pick up from stuff that manga does, right? Manga doesn't have this problem at all. Like, this is not a conversation that we have. Oh, why didn't we know Luffy could do this, and that in the first book? You know, he could stretch, and that's about it, right? To that degree, if you read volume 1 of One Piece, right? You know, he's a pirate, so you know a little bit about him, but we don't even know what the hell the One Piece is, right? And we're 1,000-something volumes in on this. That's not a problem with it. We didn't know Goku what a Saiyan was until to Z, right? Like
that happened, yeah.
These are not conversations that they have, right? And I think that's our approach more than anything. It's like, we're not thinking now. We're not thinking tomorrow. We're not thinking year 1, year 2, year 3. We have to think in a sense of year 5, year 15, year 20, and we got to take our time with how we tell these stories. So while that may not be for everybody, I recognize that, and sure, there will be a story or two that we're going to inevitably tell that is a little more front loaded in some of those aspects. But that's just not the story that we're telling here at the Rippaverse, because not immediately, because we're playing a long game, as I was talking about before. So yeah, maybe 5 years from now, we're not having this conversation because we have 5 years worth of books that have come out, hundreds, maybe perhaps thousands of pages that have come out on an individual character, and you've learned so much about them there. So that's what I would say. It's like, while I think a lot of that more so comes, and this is just my experience, I'm not saying that this is the same for everybody. A lot of that approach comes from peers and less readers, right? And for our readers, that slower burn seems to be what's working for us. And what a lot of people love about this, that we're not like holding their hands through things. It's funny you mentioned what ISOM can and can't do. There's a lot that you get of what he can and can't do. We're just not explicitly maybe stating it, right? When he falls, when Yaira in ISOM 1 throws him down, he's having some internal dialogue about, well, this is something that's a problem, right? And you learn about what he can do, but you also learn about what he cannot do.
Yeah, he can't fall from a tall building.
Yeah, yeah. So you learn about those sorts of elements, and that's our approach. And I get it. That's not everybody's way that they like to tell the story, especially those that want to read so much material that, you know, they're moving on to someone else's product. But as a businessman, I can't approach my stories like that. I gotta write like the people that are invested in the Rippaverse are playing the long game, and they are truly invested in it. So that's just our approach. Not knocking anybody that does it different.
It can get really frustrating. I don't know how many first issues I've picked up from a new creator where the first 6 pages tells me everything I need to know about the entire story, and I don't need to read any further than that. And that works, I guess, to some degree. That was an expectation for a while. But yeah, I think there is some, as one of the commenters said, there's almost an expectation in Western comics that you're going to front load some of this for me.
Mm-hmm.
I like a slow burn. I like learning that a character's powers might adapt and adjust over time as they get better, as they learn new things and things like that. So I'm interested to see where all of that goes with Isom as a character. And not every book you're going to make is going to be for everybody. I mean, clearly,
that's
not every character, not every story. Some people are going to love it. Some people are going to hate it. I think in this world, loving and hating are almost the same thing because it generates the same amount of buzz about it. So so it works out. It works out. I think in the end. But yeah. So that was. I was kind of wondering about that.
Yeah. Look. I mean, look. It definitely with a shared universe kind of situation. You'd be a fool to think that everybody's going to be into everything. We already have right now people talking about, hey, I liked Alpha Core more than Isom. I liked Isom more than Alpha Core, or this is why I'm going to be sticking to this title versus that title. And then we got this mammoth back here that's going to be dropping soon enough in Yaira, and inevitably there'll be those that like that. That's a good problem to have as far as I'm concerned, right? If there's going to be something for everybody where they like, hey, I'm not necessarily into that. Yeah, there's going to be those super fans that are into everything, but there may be something like, hey, I'm going to keep up with this title. Ain't no love lost there, man. That's what it's about.
So, I mean, that's what we try to do over at Arrow Comics, just kind of blend, have something for everybody, I mean, I think that's a smart move, especially for the business side of things. And again, here we like to talk about not only the creative process, but also the business process. How is it that you balance between those two aspects?
Good question. By the way, and that's a fantastic question. And for me, I think they're intertwined. And I think this is the mistake that some people separate them so much. Like you got to get a lot of creative people. It was like when I said like the more difficult process of this, and it made some people very angry because I don't think they were actually listening to what it was that I was saying, was the logistical side and the business side than it was the creative stuff. And they are inherently intertwined though. Like you can't treat them as if they're separate entities. A business success is going to have to come from a creative. And you can't justify continuing doing creative endeavors if the business isn't in order. So for me, I came from a business line of thinking with my music stuff. This isn't my first rodeo with business. If there's one aspect that I got down pat, that's it. It's the business stuff. But I don't treat them like they're completely different. Yes, they're different concepts. Yes, but they are intertwined. So funny, we were just talking about like storytelling and playing the long-term game. That's as much of a business decision as it is a creative one, right? Because I have to keep people enthusiastic about this. I have to keep people invested. I have to give them a reason to remain invested in this storytelling with that sort of thing in mind. The same can be said for really anything else. It's something like a release schedule, right? It's all that it's tied into the creative stuff as well as the business. So for me, I got my guys that have their specialty, right? Like Alex in his role here as my financial operations guy, his job is to count the ducats. Like it ain't that he's not doing a lot of creative stuff. And the same can be said for some of the guys that are focusing on creative stuff and creative stuff only. So yes, you're going to have those people that in their expertise, that's what they're focusing on. Absolutely. However, just from a company perspective, especially this is why when we do our leadership meetings are including everybody that's leading on whatever that is, right? So if it is some of the creative stuff and their responsibility there, they're part of these meetings because we all have to be on the same page because every business decision that we make is based on the creative ideas that we have and vice versa. So I would recommend anybody that's aspiring to do things independently, don't like go all in on one and act like the other problem is going to take care of itself, because it's not. You have to very much, and you should very much, at least in my honest opinion, take both of them in consideration and do it very, very early on. And if there's something that you don't know, either get some people in that know more about it, do a lot of research, but don't neglect it. Do not, especially business, because I mean, what reason are we doing this for if not to eat off of it? And you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you run something into the ground just because you made some mistakes financially, or you weren't considering the business because you thought you had all the creative ideas in the world. So get people in that know it, or just do some just heavy amount of research.
So how many creative leads or team leads, not necessarily creative, but team leads, are you managing right now?
So we have, I mean, we'll talk about the major departments. What are there, like 3 if you include like some of the creative stuff, as well as like the miscellaneous kind of random stuff and obviously the more logistical warehouse, shipping, fulfillment area as well. So in those departments, we have some leads that are obviously under those for sure, but you got kind of those 3 major departments is what it is that we're working with. So yeah.
So logistics is one area of the business, comic book business, that a lot of creators, especially new guys, smaller creators, like a lot of the guys that are watching this show, they're coming into this kind of new, right? It's one area that I think a lot of us struggle. At what point did you make decisions to really focus on that, and what was some of what went into your decision making, and how did you establish that?
Well, it was considered immediately. Again, the only thing that changed was the volume, and that changed a lot, make no mistake. But coming from it's funny how similar comic book in terms of its industry is to the music industry, right? It is so similar, man. So a lot of that was a direct transfer. It was like, hey, I've already been here. I've dealt with this sort of stuff, negotiations and all that. But to your point, that was experience, right? So experience had a lot, and you don't know what you don't know with some of these. This is why I don't necessarily fault a lot of people. You might need to get faulted if you don't make the adjustment, having the problem be a problem, right? But
right, yeah.
What people don't know, they don't know. So when you have a lot of these new guys that are coming in, especially with again, the barriers of entries have been lowered. So people are able to engage in ways that they never could before. And that's a beautiful thing. But in the same respect, you talk about them struggling because, well, again, they don't know what they don't know. And there's a lot that has to go into it on the logistics side to get this bad boy to function properly, to get this thing to work. So it's like you got to have the right people in the right positions. It is a team sport. Do not feel like don't be so arrogant that you feel like you know everything, right? I have guys, my leadership guys are in positions that we talked about earlier. I trust them to be in the position that they're in. So I allow them to flourish. I allow them to make the hard decisions. I mean, if I go into the warehouse, right? You got my warehouse manager, you got my operations manager, right? I'll go there. I want them to see that their owner would never ask of them something that I would never do. The guys that are there packing orders and doing all of that stuff. But in the same respects, if there are issues that arrive, it's not me that they go to, right? It's their lead, it's their manager, it's their operations guy. That's who it is that they go to, because I have them in the position for a reason. And there are times where they will make a decision that I can't, because I might not understand it, right? There's a call that they have to make. And I'll be like, oh, well, this is my perspective, and I don't really see where you're coming from. And I trust them to make the right decision. And oftentimes they do. That's why they're there in the first place. So it's very team sport.
Do you find it's easier to give trust to people that you're paying than people that just offer you opinions?
Yeah, they got a little more skin in the game, right? So yeah, for sure, those are the people that I'm gonna listen to the most, especially with like some of the creative stuff. These guys that are here, listening to customers and the people that are here, those are the folks that you want to listen to the most, because they're coming into it with some with a different perspective, right? Especially the guys that are internal, right? They know the inner workings of the company, and I pay them well to make hard decisions, difficult decisions. I pay them very, very handsomely to do that, and they do great. I mean, our efficiency has increased so much over the past year, some change with the new additions that we've had. So yeah, don't be afraid to work with people, man. I mean, it ain't nothing to if you don't know, you don't know. Acknowledge your ignorance. That's one thing that I've learned in business, if nothing else, is that you have to understand when you have a specific shortcoming, and you have to plan accordingly for that. So when I know that, hey, creatively, I got my shortcomings there, like with the art perspective. We joke about this shitty sketch that I have of Isom suit, right? Because my eye, that's not where it's at. So we bring people in that do come from that perspective. Like recently, Kane and White. We have Igor here. That's what they're here to do. They're here to look at that stuff.
I really got to commend you for that. You see, I'm a firm believer in being the weakest link in the chain, and I know if I'm the weakest link, then it's a pretty strong chain, and surrounding yourself with people that have expertise. But some people would argue that if someone is on your payroll, that they're not going to push back effectively when it needs to happen. And certainly that can be the case. I pastored for a number of years. And so I not only ran not only was I in charge of a staff, but a staff of volunteers on top of it. And so that certainly can be the case, but I know it comes down to the culture. So how do you create a culture that says, hey, we can tell Eric that maybe he doesn't know anything about this one, and let me do it.
Trust him. That's where the micromanaging gets you in trouble, right? You got to trust them when they're entrusted to make difficult decisions. Then, in my experience, and it's always been this way, they will make the right decision. And like I allow them to disagree. Like there's no, hey, you don't like Eric had a decision that he was leaning towards, and we did something opposite. Nobody's getting destroyed because of that. That's just not why. Again, why do I have you in the position if that's the case?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I'd argue that you're going to get the most valuable information from those types of people, right? There's people that, for example, when Chuck's talked about like Isom, the story, and he's commended it before, and then there'll be people that'll be like, well, that's different because Chuck's being paid. You don't know Chuck Dixon. If you think that his opinion on something like that can be bought and paid for, you have no idea who this man is. You have no idea who he is. And that's I would argue an insult to him and all of what he's accomplished. He's one of the few guys that are in this position that can call their own fucking shots. If Chuck Dixon wanted to tell me to fuck off, he could do that, right? Like, that's exactly what it is that he could do. So for me, it's about putting people in positions to succeed, trusting them, empowering them, more importantly, and you're going to get the best version of that person. And that's what I believe why this works the way that it does is because people, first of all, this is a fun job for everybody here. They love being here. I got to tell people not to work, especially on weekends. Well, a lot of my creative guys are back office guys. But you're going to get the best version of that person when they are working a job it is that they love, and they're working towards a goal that they feel they actually have a piece of the pie, right? It's they have some sort of bearing on the outcome of a given scenario or just the output of the company, and we entrust them. So I let them make these decisions, even if it goes against my better judgment. We'll handle those problems. If it ends up hitting the fan, and okay, we'll address it and we'll adjust. But as far as the initial decisions, I trust these guys that are in the position that I put them in to do great things, and that's what they do.
Yeah, coming from a management background myself, my argument to that is that if people are invested in what you're doing and their livelihood matters,
true,
for the success of this, they're going to be way more invested in making sure that this thing is successful. And clearly you guys are being successful and seeing success. It seems around every corner. Each campaign just keeps doing better than the last. Second issues tend to do worse than first issues.
Oh yeah, that's to be.
And so the expectation is if you can do at least half of what you did for the first issue on your second, you're going to be okay, right? And you did that with Isom 2. These books, I'm impressed with what AlphaCore's done, and looking forward to some of this other stuff that you've got coming up. What I want to do, I want to take a quick break though and look at an article, and I want to get the panel's thoughts on this one. So Marvel thinks more gore might help. if you saw this or not.
Mm.
Announces Red Band edition of Blood Hunt. Marvel Comics has announced that it will release both regular and Red Band editions of the main 5-issue miniseries anchoring its Blood Hunt vampire crossover event. The company announced the Red Band edition of the Blood Hunt issues will include additional pages and more graphic content than the regular editions and will be polybagged and labeled with a parental advisory. This is the first time a Marvel comic has been produced in both regular and mature readers' versions, which Marvel says is fitting for the blood-soaked saga where vampires will viciously sink their teeth into your favorite heroes.
I don't know if that's the answer, but whatever.
Blood Hunt sounds like that special time of the month. That's all I'm gonna say.
The Blood Hunt.
Jeez.
That's disgusting, Pedro. That's just gross.
I mean, maybe I look. They got some guys probably making some decent money to make these sort of decisions. I don't know if they've identified something in the market and they think this is gonna. That's an interesting approach. I will say that to have these different versions of the same thing. It's not the first time we've seen it, but to this degree, this is interesting, at least for their company. So I don't know if that's the answer. I mean, not how the article prefaces it and thinks like, hey, like this is what they want. This is gonna fix some things. I don't know. I wouldn't put too much into that, but I don't know. Maybe they see something I don't see.
I don't see the point of that really, because it means that they're going to take, for argument's sake, 5 pages out of that someone. How does that affect the story? And if it's not affecting the story, there's no point in those extra pages being in. It's just for the sake of it, isn't it? Just violence for the sake of it.
Yeah, I think it comes down to storytelling.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. If some vampire's biting somebody and you get the regular comic, and then when you buy the Red Band one, you see the head coming off. What's the point? There's no point. Or have I missed it? I don't see the point.
So we're doing an anthology where we had some obscure creators, people that haven't really been published before, and we took some public domain characters, and we told them they had 6 to 8 pages to tell a story. And initially we got some pushback, and I said, look, if you can't tell a story in 6 to 8 pages, you can't tell a story in 24 or 96 pages. I mean, you've got to be able to understand pacing and how to tell that story. And I don't think a few extra pages of gore is going to help, especially when what we really need are more young readers to replace the old guys that are dying off. I guess that's just my thought on it. Which brings me to the question, Eric, do you have plans to try to focus on bringing in younger readers at all?
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's just like you got to do. One thing that I've learned, again, not just from manga, but I've actually had the luxury of talking to Eric and Julia Leewald, who are the creators of or the showrunner producers for X-Men, the animated series, right?
Cool.
And they talked about how they specifically avoided trying to write, even though they knew this was going to be on Fox Kids, right, or whatever it was. They refused to write down to the audience, right? And I think that's why that stands the test of time. I'm not going to tell you to go to get Disney Plus to go watch this, but what I will say this is if you have, because I went and did it when I was still consuming this product from Marvel, right? Watching it as an adult is a completely different experience, right? You appreciate it a lot more. It's a lot more intricate than you remember. I promise you, if you go watch like the X-Men the animated series. And I think that you gotta kind of find that balance of, yeah, you want an entry point, right, for these younger readers without having to like dumb it down. I think that's what we think when we think younger readers. Unfortunately for the West, we're thinking some goofy like stuff to kind of get them involved. But again, like I was talking about earlier, manga doesn't have that problem. that's where all the young people are trending. They're not writing these goofy, like kid friendly, like and when I say that, I mean it's age appropriate, maybe, like, but it's not like wrote down to them, right? That's not what these mangakas are doing, or trying to produce content for them. They don't want that version of it. I mean, I've talked about this with comic shop owners on my channel. It's like if a 11-year-old or whatever went to a comic book shop and he has the option to get, hey, here's the kid version of Batman, and he's drawn in a way that looks goofy, or there's like Batman, let's say that's happening right there, and this is the Detective comic version. They always take the Detective comic version or Batman version, not this like kiddie version of Batman doing this kiddie stuff. They don't want that. And again, manga shows you a recipe, or rather, if you want to look at it that way, of where these young people are trending. And all of these stories, if you read them, they're not wrote down with the kid in mind. Jujutsu Kaisen is not wrote down to with the kid in mind. Demon Slayer, these are not stories that are like, yeah, we're gonna treat you like you're an idiot or you're a young person, right? And you don't possess the intellectual capacity to understand that. So I think that's what Western and American companies have to try to figure out what that balance looks like. But I think we run ourselves a risk of messing this up greatly if you're trying to focus so much on like, hey, we want to get the young kids involved, and like, okay, how are you going to do it? You're going to just write. And then when you start hearing these terms like kid friendly, it's often this dumbed down, mundane version of what already exists. And that we've already seen. Marvel hasn't stopped doing that. DC hasn't stopped doing that stuff, and they have not been able to get young readers to get into their stuff. It just doesn't work.
True. Yeah. So you said
not only that, the things like this problem is a Western problem. Has been our problem since the inception of time. I mean, since World War II, Japan created comics because they didn't have TV. So they made comics for everybody. And everybody consumes. It's part of their culture now. We don't have that down here. And ever since the inception of, well, I can't talk about comic books, but I can talk animation. Ever since the inception of animation is for kids. And the storytelling is just hindered by that. I don't know. It's like a weight on our necks as Western storytellers. And we have to get rid of that. Dude, they're eating our lunch.
Yeah, I think we have to. We have this misconception that telling a story to kids is somehow you've got to make it almost whitewashed or fluffed up in some way, rather than making it age appropriate. You can still tell a pretty gritty story while keeping it age appropriate. You know, we've done a lot of coverage on these books that they don't want, you know, pornographic books they're trying to put in school libraries. We've done a lot of coverage on that, and we feel very strongly about those kind of things. I just don't think that, you know, like what Russ was saying in the comments earlier, that these stories with their, you know, the sex stuff and the, you know, the things they talk about, doesn't make an adult, or I mean, it stops it from being kid appropriate. I think, you know, I think there's things that kids identify with, that adults also identify with, that you can both watch the story and enjoy it from different perspectives. Like, I talk about this all the time. My dad and I bonding over Star Trek, you know, with Captain Kirk, you know. I see that we have a problem with that.
It's a unique Western issue for sure. Like I said, and I think that's what, from, you know, these people who are trying to identify markets like in America and trying to kind of figure out their way independently. I think there's a lot that you can learn from. Okay, is there a version of this that exists that does not deal with this problem? And I think, for as much as we might hate to do it, I think looking to the Japanese, and I'm not saying to copy what the Japanese do. That's not what it is that I'm saying doing. I'm saying that oftentimes their mere existence and the success is obliterating whatever narrative it is that we're operating as if it's truth, right? Like this whole, we talk about comics and the downtrend of them. It's like, okay, who's not having that problem? Manga's not having that issue. In the West, I'm saying they have grown significantly in the West. At the end of the day, it's a comic, right? It maybe you got to read it the wrong way, and sometimes it's colorless, or most time it doesn't have any color. but it's a comic at the end of the day. So it's not that these youngsters aren't into comics. It's not that these folks aren't into comics. They're just not into your stuff. So what we got to figure out is what is that disconnect? What are they doing that is more attractive to the Western audience? Again, they're writing it from their perspective, Eastern style of storytelling, right? And somehow they are dominating the West in their own markets. We got to have a bit of humility about ourselves to acknowledge that and figure out what that is. And sometimes we have to sort of admit and come to terms with some very, very harsh realities. And I think you got to that's the approach that you have to have as the businessman, instead of, and oftentimes what the West has done is, well, something's changed and maybe there's something wrong with the audience. It's like, nah, bro, it's not. That's not. Maybe it's you. Maybe it's something it is that you're doing collectively. So we got to kind of figure that out.
Sometimes we tell the story that we want to tell. Sometimes we tell the story that people want to read, right?
Yeah, but the thing is, like, I think what helps Japan, and by no means I'm bashing people in the West, is that they're fearless with their storytelling. They don't care. They see people like over here, like just belly aching over Twitter, like, you should try, like, no, I will not do such thing, because I told the story and you bought the book. It's your fault. And we should be like that too.
I think people are afraid to get canceled.
Yeah, but canceled from what? Like right now, if somebody prepared to get canceled, I live in a mountain. I dug a well 2 days ago. How are they going to cancel me? On what? It's whatever, dude. Okay, you don't like me. Well, I don't like you back. And that should be the end of it.
Yeah.
So the Rippaverse website, rippaverse.com, nice looking website. You've got some stuff on here. Like what I wanted to do, I want to watch this trailer, if that's all right.
Go for it.
I have a question.
I have to zoom it up.
Fluorspar can be an unpredictable city. But fluency doesn't mitigate its problems. In some ways,
I think we're losing sound, Luke.
it amplifies.
You guys can't hear it?
It's jumping in and out.
This is why we're deployed.
Just mute it. The visuals are good.
Yeah, I keep having trouble with it. I'm changing over my sound card and stuff the way I'm doing things. So I was supposed to have a new camera and things today, and it's held up in the mail because I live in Amish country. So about the same problem that Pedro has, but for different reasons. So this trailer, this animation is really good, man.
Oh, appreciate it. Thank you.
Like, this was well thought out. And so first off, tell me about the process of this.
So part of our reinvestment effort, and I think people, you got to understand, everything that we do is internal. Like, as far as the investment is concerned, there's no sugar daddy over here that can just subsidize cool things that we want to do. We have to justify it, right?
Oh, you mean the Blaze isn't supporting you?
Yeah. The old Glenn Beck isn't. He doesn't have his.
I'm sorry, I got salty. I'm sorry.
He doesn't. I don't have access to, contrary to some people's beliefs, I don't have access to anything. And if I was supposed to, please send me the check, because I have not gotten shit yet. With that being said, animation was, I think, the best. Again, one of those things, analyzing the market and understanding how we can make that appealing and maybe entice people that would have not bought the comic to buy the comic, because this is a more digestible medium, right? Yeah. So that's my approach with animation, is that, again, kind of learning a little bit from the Japanese, right? And that anime sells the manga sells the anime. That's just how that relationship exists. Yeah. So we were like, why don't we figure out how we can implement that without killing our pockets, right? So we started with short trailers, right? You first saw a glimpse of that with ISOM 2 trailer. We learned a little bit about it. We start to build our internal animation team with this right here. And I'm really, we can, of course, keep improving. We can keep being better with Rippaverse Studio stuff that we're doing. But
Eric, I have to stop you, brother. You have an internal animation team.
Yeah.
Can I inquire how big the team is? How big the team is?
So we have it is including my like director there. It is about 7, like about 7, yeah. Give or take. That's about how many people that were involved in like top to bottom, give or take.
Pedro's just looking for a job, is all.
I'm not looking for. I'm trying to do my own thing, but dude, I've been an advocate of the 7-man team for the last 20 years.
Yeah,
and that's just because people are afraid of animation because they think already, I have to pay like $1.8 million in budget, and it's not supposed to be that way. You just need a core team that knows what they're doing, have proper storyboards, and give them time to develop. But the thing with animation, and that's something, animation is not going to make money by itself. Animation is your advertisement. It's basically your merch vehicle, so people like notice you.
Yeah.
And that's why like a lot of people, like, it's been very difficult for somebody like me who works by himself, and I like take like 2 to 3 months to do anything, for people to understand, like, dude, this is gonna be a vehicle for you to sell your comic book. You're gonna sell more comic books if you have something that people can see your characters in motion. It's just a different appeal. So, dude, kudos. Like that was the core of my question. Like, if you have an internal animation team and how big it was, and the fact that you said 7 is validating my life, sir. Thank you.
Appreciate that. No, it was it's you put it perfectly, that it's like I did not, this got like, for those of you that don't know, like I don't know where it's at now, but last time I checked, it was over 200,000 views on this on like the actual official trailer on Rippaverse. I had no idea it was going to do that, because ISO 2 didn't even do that, right?
Yeah.
So this what it is it's showing that, for one, this was a great investment for us, because it's getting a lot of eyes. And I mean, immediately people are like, oh, when are we going to get a series, yada yada. But that's the cool thing about it, is it almost subsidizes itself, because it's like it's leading more people to go get into like the comics, want to invest in the company, as well as buyers, because they're like, well, look at this cool thing that we get if we're supporting it. So and to your point, like it's not cheap, but it doesn't have to. Like, I think Hollywood got everybody tricked into believing that this stuff costs just an insane amount of money to do. And like, to your point, Pedro, it's not supposed to be like that. It isn't.
No. It's not.
All right, so I actually don't know how old you are, Eric. I'm 43. I assume we're close to the same age.
I'm gonna blow your mind here. You got me about 10 years.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Whoa. You're a young guy.
Spring chicken. When I said I was a spring chicken, I wasn't joking.
He's a youngin'. He's
Eric's
a
baby.
Yeah, I was spring. I'm quite literally just getting started.
So you were really reading that Mike Barron Flash as a very impressionable youth.
That was,
As a kid.
Okay.
As a kid.
So we were going.
There you go.
So I grew up. I'm a teenager in the '90s. I'm reading comic books. My first comic book experience was I was 5 years old. Fell in love with them then. Really started getting into the X-Men because of the X-Men series. Before that, I was mostly a DC comic book reader, some Marvel, Spider-Man, Punisher, things like that. Started getting into independent comics, about 13, 14 years old, 12 years, maybe a little earlier, 12, because I found the black and white sections where I first grabbed an Arrow Comics comic back in the day, and learned about some of these guys, like, Randy, Russ Leach, people like that.
Weirdos. Yeah.
Those are weirdos. And so but I would watch the Batman series. I would watch the X-Men series, like you mentioned. And those really fueled my love for comics, because they were the gateway. They're gateway into comics for me. And knowing that about yourself. And I think that story, it goes across the board for a lot of people. And one of my plans is to turn my single issues into little 7 or 8 minute shorts. Okay. Do you have a plan on doing a full blown animated series with your characters, and maybe even putting them regularly out on something like Bent Key Media that is just launched by
Wow.
Yeah, the guys over there. Yeah.
So So if for those of you that don't know, we kind of completely overhaul like our membership system, and that is going to be such a key role because I would love to do stuff it is that you're talking about, Luke, because it's just a matter of, again, having that monetization there and trying to make that make sense. So part of our website overhaul that we're working on, we started a couple of months ago, is going to be this app, the Rippaverse application, right? Like that's going to be a thing. Obviously, you can access it via web, but we want a place where we can kind of treat it as a hub for not just all things Rippaverse, for sure that, but also with some of the video related content that we want to do that will be stuff like anime. Look, if I would love to be in a position, it would, again, you want to talk about living a dream and talk about this with gaming. If we could regularly put out animated content, right? I would love that. I would love to do a series. I would love to do it. And I feel like it's very doable. This isn't an impossible thing. I think we've laid the foundation. We've been able to manage our costs. We've been able to identify kind of what works and what doesn't to make this make sense. I think we got a plan. I think with the whole Rippaverse app, we got a plan here. So the answer is yes. We're working towards. This is a teaser. This is the show, especially this. This is like our art style, as you guys are seeing with this animation. We were figuring it out. It looks a little different from ISOM 2's trailer, but I think this is going to be, give or take, kind of how some of our material is going to look in the future.
It's very doable for a full series.
Yeah, it is. So we believe that we'll be in a position to do that very, very soon, like quick. And I'm excited, man. I can't wait for people to get this new website. This is gonna be it's gonna be good.
So you mentioned getting into video games, and I'd probably shoot myself if I didn't ask you about 3D modeling and action figures and all that kind of stuff, which is my bag. You have any plans to, like, obviously video games, you're gonna need 3D modelers, but do you have any plans for action figures coming out in the future? Or?
I would love to. It's just a matter of making that make sense financially. I have been humbled, absolutely humbled by that industry and doing my research and how a lot of what all goes into that. But yes, I would love to do that. I would love to get in that scene, sculpts, again, figures, whether posed or not fully articulated. I would love to do all of that. Like, seriously, I would love to do that. And we've had some conversations that have got a little closer to making that a reality. I think I would argue we're further along the line with the animation stuff, but I do believe like within maybe the next year is something that maybe having that be a line, I think is something that we're going to have available very, very soon. We'll see.
All right, I want to thank 32 Flavors of Nick Weiser for the $5 super chat. Thank you. Says, thanks for a great stream, Luke, and thanks, Rippa, for additional knowledge and perspective. Have an excellent day to the panel. Thank you again. Do appreciate that. Your generosity.
Appreciate that.
It's not gone unappreciated. All right, so animation, video games, maybe action figures, different collectibles. You've obviously got the merch thing down. Right now, you're doing a lot of superhero stuff. Do you have plans to open up to other genres and do other kind of things? Horror, suspense, cowboy stuff, who knows?
Yeah.
Cowboy stuff.
No, we have plenty of those. Actually, I would argue, I'm not even going to argue. It's a factual thing that we have some of those stories that are available, that are already been worked on. Let's say that will be available, that are farther along than you could imagine. Mike Barron's, his Gooding is a change of pace. Holy cow! From it's not gonna be. I don't know. Maybe it is Whiplash or will be, because it's different from Yaira. Right? It's way different because Gooding's not a super powered being. That's not the type of character he is. But I put out a poll not too long ago. asking people about that. Like, what other genres make sense that you guys would like to see? The cool thing about the Rippaverse is that there's room for it all. We're not limited to doing one thing. That's the point of the universe, is that if we can make it make sense, we will make it make sense. So yes, there will be other genres. And again, we already got pencil, ink, and colors on different genres that'll be announced soon enough. So it's gonna be exciting.
So, is there anything that you can tell us about Gooding that won't be breaking an NDA that maybe could excite some of the viewers about this story?
Let me say, what can I say that won't NDA it myself? It is the first of the stories that we will put out. This is more of a origin. It's funny, we were talking about that a little earlier, right? Than it is that of anything else that we've got up until this point. So what you're going to learn a lot about is why Gooding is Gooding, right? Why he is, what he does is very, very unique. He's doing these emergency services on the outskirts of Flores Park. So why is he doing that? You're going to learn a lot about that. And that was, believe it or not, Mike's idea, not mine. Because I went into it like, yeah, this is a character. I pitched that idea to him as far as the character, but he was like, okay, we should do this. And I'm like, oh, he's Mike Barron. Mike Barron say do it. That's what we're doing.
Right, yeah.
And he came up with that approach. So it's not only a different change of pace in terms of the genre from what you see up to this point, but the style story that you're going to see. You're going to learn a lot about him and why he does what he does. Mike Barron did a phenomenal job of that.
Yeah. Now, before I kind of get into my last kind of question, we close things up for the day. I did just want to go ahead and touch on one thing, and feel free to tell me to kick rocks if you don't want to answer it. But there's been a lot recently of and I think you called it a big fat nothing burger is what you called it on Twitter the other day, or on X, whatever you want to call it. Twatter, sometimes I call it.
Twatter.
Is people talking about the art from ISOM 1, ISOM 2, and kind of those choices. We talk about the business and the creative process of making comics a lot. And just for our audience here, I know there might be some carryover, but in just flat out terms of making comics, do you want to address that? And just like,
well, I'm guessing you're referring to 3D assets. Oh, okay. 3D yeah, 3D assets. Yeah. I did a video on that if you guys want to go watch that on my channel about that. But yeah, there is some crossover. What I called it a nothing burger is because Cliff using three references is what it was. Let's just say this. It was there's a reason why people waited a full fucking year, excuse my language, after the first book came out before all of a sudden this became a problem, right? We went a literal full year, 2 books in, and this was not even nobody mentioned anything being a problem. It's almost as if there is some ulterior motives that are involved there. But the reason why I called it a nothing burger is because of not only how often it has been a thing, but because how it wasn't a problem, right? And that is Cliff referencing 3D or whatever it is to do like a truck or some lamp or some shit. Now, as I've said publicly, if for me, would I like to put him in a position, because I think what people wanted me to do is like, oh, well, now everybody after a year found out about it, it's time to throw your artist under the bus. The answer is no. That's not happening.
I appreciate that, by the way.
What I am going to do is set him up for success. And, with the addition of not just Kanan, but some of the other guys that we have, is going to elevate him so he can rely maybe a little less on, now that this is brought to my attention, less on that, right? So we're already doing what we need to do to ensure, because he's a phenomenal art. He knows what he's doing. It's not like he doesn't know what he's doing. I mean, you could see that, and then and what it is that he's done in the past. He's, again, this is a veteran in this industry. He didn't start, and that's the reason why it wasn't a problem for me. It's like, okay, I can't get angry with a guy doing what he's been doing for publishers way bigger than myself for the last 20 years, right? Along with a lot of his colleagues. So it's like, we set him up for success is what we wanted to do. So we brought in guys. ISOM 3, Andrew he said this a million times, and it's the honest to God's truth. ISOM 3 is the best work that Cliff Richards, that includes his old Marvel DC work, is the best work that he has ever done. And I think that speaks to the team elevating him and assisting him in wherever he needs help.
Look, we've got artists here on the panel and even watching that they don't have to use references, but many of them do. Some lightbox things years ago, some lightbox things yesterday. We oftentimes reference a guy named Wally Wood, who said, why draw what you can copy? Why copy what you can cut and paste?
Yeah.
And why cut and paste what you or something. I can't remember
the
whole
line.
Exactly.
Yeah,
there's a whole line there, right?
Yeah, we should get that quote.
Wally Wood. Yeah, I normally have it up here in front of me, but I took it down. I believe that if Wally Wood was working in an era with 3D assets or even 2D assets, he would be using those, because that's par and course with for just being a working illustrator, sequential artist, right? These are used all the time. Nobody's complaining about manga.
Nope.
When nearly 80% of what they do is 3D assets and 2D assets that are pre-made.
That is true.
As a working artist who produces 10 to 15 pages a week, if you don't think that I use pre-made assets for books, projects that are 150 pages long, 200 pages long, you're going to be fooling yourself. Because I have to create assets so that when I go back to a scene, I have consistency. So there's things that are pre-made, things that I can go back to create that for consistency. I have folders full of reference images of faces that I'll go back to over and over and over again, facial expressions, poses, things like that. As much gets hand-drawn as humanly possible. But I'm getting ready to do a book that's got space battles. I'm going to have spaceships that are battling, right? Guess what? I'm making a few spaceships. Let's design the spaceships, draw them up, have a 3D modeler 3D model them for me so that I can then figure out what it's going to look like from this camera angle, that camera angle, I'm
doing 130 pages of robots and kaiju. You think I'm not modeling every robot in that book? Of course I am. I mean, I have the 3D training. Some people don't have that luxury. They might pay somebody. So I don't know, like the whole 3D asset thing, like there might be some merit to the things like people say, like price point. Like, so like the book is priced this much, you shouldn't use 3D assets. But if you don't know how the goose is cooked, learn how it's cooked.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Classes first.
This is how the sausage is made, folks. It really is.
Yep.
And that's why I did the video. I went through some history lessons right there a little bit, because I think the average viewer doesn't know that. They don't know how prominent that it is. And it has. I mean, you mentioned manga. Don't get us started on manga. Like to your point, and they don't shy away. You can go watch videos of some pretty big mangakas. They're like, they got videos of showing them like, yeah, this is exactly. I took this thing, pasted it right here. We did this ain't even traced. We just put it in the background, and it's just right there floating around. And it's like, wow, that's their approach, right? So that's why we were like, hey, it was a weird thing that popped up, and pay attention to that. It popped up after a year, man. Like the ISOM 1 didn't just come out, man. It's just all of a sudden it was an issue. However, and to Pedro's point, the things that are of merit, we'll address, right? It's like, okay, if we don't have to rely on that anymore, then yeah, we can help him be more efficient. And that's why you get a guy like Kanan White. You get these guys to assist him there. Don't throw him under the bus and be like, "Oh, you're off the project," because somebody discovered that, you know. And I saw someone say that the bit about Avery himself, which that part wasn't true. We're talking about lamps and buildings and trucks and shit and castles, like, you know, that's what we're referring to. If we can assist him and make him better, that's what it is that we do. We go, and that's my job, right? Definitely as the owner of the company, that's my job to set him up for success. So the things that are of merit, we make sure we address. But the majority of it was just a nothing burger, and I'm glad we're past that saga.
Yeah. Now,
can I interject for a second?
Sure.
Because I'm a 3D artist and it's my thing. I see no problem with it at all. Like using it, especially as a reference point. Like I extensively model all of my 3D assets, like these guys here, for example, right? And like I use these as reference characters to give to my artist, because, you know, I'm not the best 2D artist like yourself, but like, you know, I can model the crap out of anything, right? So for me, it's a vehicle to like to drive the story along. So like I got no problem with that. The old guys used, like I said, Wally Wood, anything to save time to translate an idea. There's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that at all.
Yep.
So you know, and I'm friends with EVS. He was on the show a few weeks ago. We gleaned a lot of wisdom knowledge from him. Same as we have from you today. I want nothing to do with any of those beefs. I see a couple people trying to beef in the chats.
That shit's like, that's not helpful for anybody, man.
It's not productive.
No, it's not.
I think that what it does, it actually takes money out of everybody's pocket.
I agree, 100%.
When we do that shit, and I don't like it at all.
Hating ain't creating.
Right.
I agree 100%.
So I do have to do a little housekeeping before we go, and I have one last question for you before we get into that. Do you have any thoughts that you might let the Rippaverse become something like Image Comics, where others can have their own ideas and they come and they submit and you publish them through your process for these other creators? Have you ever thought of that, or is that something you want to say not a chance?
I will. So this is what I will say, and I've talked about it before, and we talked about it earlier today as well. If there is a shortcoming that I think a lot of people have and they need assistance in, definitely in our space, is going to be some of those business elements, right? I would less, if I were ever to do something like this, I would think less publishing and more trying to help them where, again, they don't know what they don't know. And we have infrastructure. We understand how this business works. And if there's something that we can offer to elevate them, these independent creatives that want to continue to do their own thing and yet offer maybe a service, I don't know. Again, I haven't thought about this like thoroughly. I lean towards that, as opposed to just traditionally like publishing, like us publishing their work. How do we elevate you and allow you to continue to maintain that level of independence? And yeah, there may be some benefits to us putting our like stamp on it, because, you know, it's going to come with its set of attraction, right? And I get that, but I think that's where this is. A lot of publishers out there. I think where these guys need the most help is how do we elevate these guys and get them to understand the business so they can flourish themselves. So I wouldn't be against like working with someone on one project and then we go let their wings fly and they go do their own thing, because they learn how this thing works out and they found an efficient way to do it. I'd much rather do something like that than the traditional publishing. But, you know, you never can say never. As far as the Rippaverse is concerned, it's, you know, we have to publish our own stuff. That's our focus, because we got this big universe. But, you know, a wing of it, doing something like that, perhaps. I don't know, perhaps.
Yeah. Congratulations on the success. The campaign is now closed, but you will be able to get things from the store, right?
Correct. You can get books from the store. Yep.
Over $1 million, man. 1.3 million.
Insane. Awesome, dude.
Wow. 13,000 books sold, man. That is so impressive. Congratulations on your success. I hope people are inspired by it. I hope people have learned something today from you as well. Guys, don't forget to go check out Rippaverse.com. Check out some of that stuff. Also, please don't forget to go over to fundmycomic.com. Check that out. Support one of the many campaigns that's over there. We have US Assassin is up there right now. Vindicated, we've got some great stuff by Mike Barron. Terminal Kill just went live today. That is a book that I'm working on right now for a guy named Tony Armour. And some of the pages we've got up there, you can pick that book up either in floppy form, digital form, or trade paperback form. And we are crowdfunding that through the end of, I think, a couple of months. I think we'll be running that there. So we're still working on that, but definitely check out Fund My Comic. There's also over there, well, Hojo.
Mythicals is there. Yeah.
Hybrids is there. Fiendish 2 is there. AR-13L is there. Scribbles. I mean, lots of good books. Soul Tag. I mean,
Soul Tag's still there. Yeah, yeah.
We can just keep going. I think
there's
we
Hatch.
put,
Hatch annotated.
Hatch annotated is there. That needs a lot of love. Too good of a book. I recently got mine. Too good of a book for you guys not to go pick that up. He is shipping those out right now.
Yep.
Definitely check that out. I do appreciate it. We also are now launching the sister site, fundiverse.com. We're getting ready to start populating that. First 25 campaigns will have a 1% platform fee so that you can keep most of your money and also help us start to drive traffic there. If you're crowdfunding anything other than a comic or game, if it's music, movies, photography, technology, those kind of things, then this is going to be the platform for you. We were asked several times about that, and so we decided we would go ahead and answer the call and do it. So again, all of that was inspired by what you did, Eric, with doing this from your own platform. Thank you again for being here. We do appreciate. We got to say thank you one more time for that $5 super chat. Not sure if you wanted to say something or not, but we do appreciate your generosity. It does not go unappreciated. Thank you so much for that. Very much. Guys, it's been a great show. Thank you, Eric, for being here. If you want to
have me, man. Thank you.
If you want to hang out for just a minute or two right after the end of this, we'll say goodbye properly. But guys, remember, there is too many people tearing things down. Build up more than you tear down. Leave the wood pile higher than you found it. And by all means, please be careful out there.
Let's be careful out there. Let's be careful out there. We had a 187 at the 7-Eleven on the corner of 4th and Main. 2 Caucasians of the male persuasion put a bullet through the cashier's brain. Moving on, I see a 211, half a dozen 459, 2 AEWs, a GTA, and several miscellaneous crimes.